The Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. Without objection, we are glad to welcome our colleague, the Chair of the House Financial Services Committee, the Honorable Representative Maxine Waters, to participate in today's hearing after our members have had their opportunity to participate and question the witnesses. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any point, and all members will have 5 days to submit statements, extraneous material, and questions for the record, subject to the length limitations in the rule. To insert something into the record, please have your staff email the previously mentioned address or contact full committee staff. As a reminder to members, please keep your video function on at all times, even when you are not recognized by the chair. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves, and please remember to mute yourself after you finish speaking. Consistent with House rules, staff will only mute members as appropriate when they are not under recognition to eliminate background noise. I see that we have a quorum, and I now recognize myself for opening remarks. Pursuant to notice, we meet today to hear from distinguished witnesses on their policy recommendations on Haiti for the Biden administration. It has been more than 11 years since Haiti suffered the devastating earthquake that killed hundreds of thousands, displaced more than 1 million people, and cost billions of dollars in damage. I am grateful that there is a continued U.S. assistance to Haiti, and I'm inspired by the resilience of the Haitian people. We must sadly recognize that the situation in Haiti has continued to deteriorate in the decades since the earthquake. Moving forward, we must be frank with ourselves and with the Haitian people as we assess the strengths and the shortcomings of our assistance programs in Haiti. Today, Haiti faces a multi-pronged crisis. President Moïse has ruled by decree for 14 months. Top government officials have been sanctioned by the U.S. government for committing human rights violations. And Haitian parents are afraid to send their children to school or travel to work, not just because of the pandemic, but because kidnapping and gang violence has spiraled out of control. Under the last administration, a U.S. foreign policy and our U.S. foreign policy turned a blind eye to matters of human rights abuses and corruption. We witnessed the Haitian government cover up corruption allegations, clamp down on the rights of journalists, and violently break up peaceful protests with virtually zero condemnation. With the Biden administration, America is once again willing to speak out against these actions, but there will be little time to waste. In the first year of President Biden's term, Haiti is slated to hold a constitutional referendum, as well as a parliamentary and presidential elections. How the United States responds to these challenges early on will play a pivotal role in establishing buy-in and trust from Haitian civil society and the Haitian people at large. However, the solutions to the crises in Haiti will not come from Washington, New York, or Geneva. These solutions must come from and for the Haitian people. As members of Congress, we must listen to the Haitian civil society as well as our constituents in the Haitian diaspora. I'm proud to have a vibrant Haitian community in my district of Southeastern Queens, New York, and I value the perspectives they share. We must work multilaterally to elevate those voices and take seriously their concerns. One concern I hear frequently is skepticism about Haiti's readiness for elections. Though I would love nothing more than to see a free, fair, and inclusive elections held immediately, we must listen to the outcry of Haitian voices who are telling us that elections this year will be neither free, fair, or inclusive if the voices of civil society and the oppositions continue to be shunned. Instead of focusing on holding a constitutional referendum that many in Haiti and in the international community have denounced as unconstitutional, President Most must take the initiative and begin serious dialogue to discuss what a peaceful transition of power can look like. I have called on the Biden administration to recognize that holding elections for election's sake in Haiti will lead to the same outcome as in the 2015 election. In order to move away from the political paralysis that has gripped Haiti over the last few years, the Haitian people need to believe that their voices matter. Finally, I want to reiterate my concerns that several of my colleagues and I expressed to Secretary Mayorkas last month. It was about the continued expulsion of Haitian migrants under Title 42 of the Public Health Services Act. Last month, at least 966 Haitians were deported to Haiti, the vast majority of which were Title 42 expulsions, without any asylum, no screening whatsoever. Given all of the challenges Haiti already faces, it is untenable for the United States to continue expelling Haitian migrants under Title 42. The problems Haiti face are complex and are only getting more challenging. These difficulties will require a new approach from the Biden administration with active engagement from Congress, particularly this committee. An increased collaboration with Haitian civil society, the Haitian American diaspora, and important regional partners like CARICOM. In my capacity as chair of this committee, I'll be working to make sure this administration works closely with Congress to do what is the best for the people of Haiti. I look forward to hearing from our distinguished witnesses on how we can make that happen. And I want to thank Ranking Member McCall for his partnership in addressing this important topic. Now, I will be submitting for the record a document from the government of Haiti. And I want to be clear, this document does not reflect my views nor my assessment of recent events. But in the interest of a full and complete hearing record with multiple views, I am submitting it for the record. I will now recognize the ranking member, Representative McCall, for his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing on a critical issue in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti is facing a political, economic, and humanitarian crisis with its current president, Jovenel Moise, ruling by decree for over a year. And while this is legal, it complicates the situation further. Current events highlight the fragility of Haiti's democracy. And sadly, Haiti has struggled consistently with political instability, extreme poverty, corruption, and other endemic challenges since its transition from dictatorship to democracy in 1987. Haiti's progress has also been hindered by natural disasters like the 2010 earthquake and Hurricane Matthew in 2016. Haiti remains the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, where nearly 60% of the population lives below the national poverty line. As a result of the COVID pandemic, Haiti's economy has contracted by an estimated 4%. I'm also concerned about the alarmingly high levels of crime and violence in Haiti and reports of local gangs, human rights abuses, and systemic corruption, which are rampant. And I worry about the capacity of Haiti's justice system to fully investigate and hold criminals accountable. No matter how difficult the situation, the United States remains committed to supporting the Haitian people. Haiti is the second largest recipient of U.S. assistance in the Western Hemisphere, receiving over $180 million in FY20. These funds are used primarily for emergency food aid and distribution, global health programs, education, and security assistance. U.S. assistance has also helped build the Haitian National Police into a professional security force, and we should continue to support its development. However, given the continuing challenges facing Haiti, I think it's fair to ask how effective our assistance has been and explore how our aid can achieve the desired outcomes. I also want to recognize the government of Haiti for maintaining diplomatic ties with Taiwan and standing with the U.S. and the international community and acknowledging the fraudulent nature of the legislative elections organized by the Maduro regime in Venezuela last year. I commend them for taking these principled positions. It's important for us to pursue policies that support the Haitian people in their efforts to address serious challenges they are facing. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative McCall. I'm honored to have a distinguished panel, 4 excellent witnesses joining us today for our hearing. Ms. Emanuela Duyan is an economist, professor, and leader of the New Pop Domi social movement, a collective of young Haitians committed to fighting corruption, impunity, and social injustice. Ms. Gerline Joseph is the co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, which elevates and empowers Haitians and other Black immigrants from the Caribbean and Africa through advocacy, organizing, and social and cultural programs. Ms. Rosie Kessner Auguste serves as program manager for the National Human Rights Defense Network, a national institution based in Haiti that advocates for the respect of human rights and conducts oversight on state institutions. And finally, Ambassador Pamela A. White. She's an American diplomat who served as U.S. Ambassador to Gambia from 2010 to 2012 and U.S. Ambassador to Haiti from 2012 to 2015. I thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to your testimony. Witnesses will have 5 minutes to deliver your opening remarks. We will also have an interpreter for one of the witnesses, and I will make allowances to account for time used for interpretation. I will gently tap my gavel when you have 30 seconds left so that you may conclude your testimony. Without objection, your prepared written statements will be made part of the record. I now recognize Ms. Emanuela Duyan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Minks, Ranking Member Markle, and members of the committee. I want to thank you for holding this hearing during a critical moment in Haiti's history. My name is Emanuela Duyan, and I'm honored to be here on behalf of Nopap Domi, a collective of engaged Haitian citizens in the struggle against government corruption and impunity. Today is not the first time the United States Congress or his committee has held a hearing to assess U.S. policy in Haiti and gather recommendations. However, we see the present situation as fundamentally different. Today, I'm hopeful that the Haitian people are on the verge of a new era, one with new actors and a clear roadmap to end all practices that perpetuate crisis after crisis and that can instead lead to the real change the Haitian people deserve. In Haiti, we are hopeful that the administration of US President Joe Biden will also break with the past and instead listen to the voices of civil society. In my written testimony, I describe the current crisis and provide a couple of recommendations that I summarize here. We believe that the Biden administration and US Congress should take the following actions. The US should recognize that the situation in Haiti today as a struggle by the Haitian people to take ownership of their government and build democracy, not simply a fight between politicians for power. The US should not be supporting Jovenel Moïse, who is a threat to Haiti's institution and the rule of law, because of his tolerance for impunity and unconstitutional and authoritarian acts, including preparation of a constitutional referendum in violation of the amendment process set forth in the Constitution, the appointment by decree of a provisional electoral council whose members are not sworn in as legally required, the recent dismissal and subsequent replacement of 3 Supreme Court judges, attempt to undermine the controlling power of the Court of Auditors, absence of political will to hold accountable those involved in massacres such as the La Saline massacre and several killings that happened during President Moses' term, including the devastating assassination last year of the president of the Bar Association of Port-au-Prince, Montferrier Dorval. His continued effort to grab power, whatever the cost, and clear attempt to consolidate power with no checks and balances, including the replacement of elected local officials by people accountable to him only, and unconstitutional decrees that raise serious concerns. The US government must recognize that, in the current context, with state sponsored gang violence, human rights abuses, increasing authoritarianism, and unconstitutional and illegal provisional electoral council, and the failure to register voters, free, fair, and credible elections cannot be safely conducted within this year. It is simply not possible. The recurrent electoral crisis and subsequent political crises have eroded citizens' faith in their governments. Rather than take sides in a constitutional dispute, it will be more helpful to listen to and offer solidarity with the Haitian people, who no longer recognize Jovenel Moïse as their president, even before his constitutional mandate ended, after years of calling on him to resign, following reports from the Court of Auditors, proving his involvement in the Petro-Caribe corruption scandal and his other deeply concerning human rights abuses. Corrupt, incompetent, and authoritarian officials should never be allowed to stay in power beyond their term in the name of democracy. The US government should recognize that past foreign-led attempts aimed to strengthen democracy in Haiti have not led to progress and have even been counterproductive. It is time to follow the leader of Haitian civil society in determining when to support elections in Haiti and respect their current effort to solve the crisis as they want to. Specifically, by organizing a non-partisan, non-corrupt, consensus-based team of civil society and political actors capable of ensuring the governance of the country, filling the institutional void at the head of the country since the end of President Moses' constitutional mandate on February 7, 2021, and restore democratic order. The US will investigate money laundering and arms trafficking, human rights abuses, and other illegal acts by Haitian officials and private sector leaders and apply sanctions, including under the Global Magnitsky Act, where applicable. It is time to send a clear signal to those who are squandering state resources with impunity and those who continue to shed blood and violate human rights. The United States should support Haitian civil society's call for the immediate release of those arrested on February 7, 2021, and not give credence to the government's narrative, given the lack of credible evidence of a coup attempt. To conclude, I want to state clearly that the people of Haiti are resolute in their desire for a true democracy, a democracy that works for all, and need to be able to count on the support of their friends and partners, including the US government in this pursuit. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Gerline Joseph, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Gerline Joseph. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance. The Haitian Bridge Alliance
Hard to hear.
direct services, advocacy, organizing on behalf of Black immigrants from the Caribbean, including Haiti, from the Afro-Latinx community, and our brothers and sisters from Africa. Today, it is with a saddened heart that I am before you. As we are speaking, there is a flight to Haiti carrying asylum seekers who have made a dangerous journey coming to our borders to ask for asylum. Today, this morning, as we speak, over 129 people are on a flight to Haiti, including what seems to be a newborn baby just a few days. It is unconscionable for us as a country, as a people, as this great United States of ours, to continue the cruel, inhuman practice and lack of records to the lives of those most vulnerable. As we stand today, with all the faith, with all the hope, as we heard from my colleague, Emmanuel, the situation on the ground in Haiti, we understand that for too long, we have been silent. The partnership between Haiti and the United States needs to be better. We understand that too many lives are at risk. We understand that this cannot continue. Haiti has not always been a migrant-sending country, but due to ongoing natural disasters, as we all know, in 2010, the earthquake that killed over 200,000 people, leaving the infrastructure of Haiti completely destroyed. Consequently, the storms and the cholera pandemic that was brought into the country by, unfortunately, health relief workers from the UN. Still, we are dealing with those aftershocks. Today, in 2021, we still feel the aftershock of the earthquake. We see people leaving the country in search for a place to live, in search for freedom, in search for refuge. But we, as the United States, turn our backs once again to the Haitian community. We understand that the immigration prison system as we know it today was a direct response to the Haitian refugees arriving at our shores in the 1980s. Enough is enough. Today, as we look back with what's currently happening in the country, in the middle of the uprising, in the middle of the people of Haiti once again asking, fighting for life and for justice, we cannot continue to do that. I will share one quick story with you of a woman who shared with us. She and her husband and her child, just 4 months old, was deported to Haiti 4 weeks ago. She shared with us that she was kidnapped, she was raped, barely escaped, was able to leave the country, went to Chile in 2017. In turn, she experienced extreme racism, which forced her again to leave to search for safety. Upon arriving at the US-Mexico border, she spent a year and a half, 18 months, waiting for a chance to ask for asylum. 4 weeks ago, she finally mustered the courage and took the chance. What she shared with me was that upon arrival, she was not even given the chance to state her case. They did not even ask her, why are you here? What are your fears? She was immediately detained for 10 days without access to any sanitary access to any sanitation. She was held for 10 days without access to a bathroom, to a shower, without access to a toothbrush or a toothpaste. With her child, her infant, who ended up having to soil his clothes. And she was denied access to change the infant's clothes and denied access to change her own clothes. At 4 a.m. in the morning, she was awakened and told to come to get breakfast, which happened to be a bean burrito. When asked, can I leave my child to sleep because it's too early and it's cold? They told her no. She pled with them. They told her that these are her words. If you don't bring the baby, we will drag her out. So these are the conditions that we see Black immigrants, Black asylum seekers, specifically Haitians, being treated as they come and ask for asylum. And we hear the conditions, we see the conditions in Haiti. So we are asking, we are demanding that we protect those lives. We are demanding that we stop the deportation and expulsions to Haiti immediately. We are asking that the flight that left today be returned to the United States with that infant, with those children, with those people.
Thank
We
you.
are asking for
Thank you.
restoration too of TPS to Haiti. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Auguste for 5 minutes.
Président Mix, Ranking Member McCall, membre de la Chambre des représentants des États-Unis, membre de la Commission des affaires étrangères.
Chairman Mix, Ranking Member McCall, members of the United States House of Representatives, members of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Bonjour, mon nom est Rosie Auguste du Sénat. Je suis avocate et responsable de programme au Réseau national de défense des droits humains.
Good morning. My name is Rosie Auguste du Sénat. I'm a lawyer and program manager for the National Network for the Defense of Human Rights.
Merci de nous offrir cette opportunité de partager avec vous des informations précises relatives à la situation de négation des droits humains qui sévit en Haïti.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you accurate information about the human rights violations that are taking place in Haiti.
Nous vous présenterons une version raccourcie de notre témoignage qui a déjà été soumis au comité et qui est disponible pour tous ceux qui seraient intéressés.
We will present an abbreviated version of our testimony that has already been submitted to the committee and is available to anyone who's interested.
Depuis 2017, les organisations de droits humains n'ont cessé de dénoncer ce qui se passe en Haïti.
Since 2017, human rights organizations have continued to denounce what is happening in Haiti.
Cependant, en dépit de ces dénonciations, l'administration américaine, l'OEA et l'ONU ont toujours accordé leur appui inconditionnel au président de facto, Jovenel Moïse, au détriment du peuple haïtien.
However, despite these denunciations, the U.S. administration, the OAS, the UN has always given their unconditional support to the de facto president, Jovenel Moïse, to the detriment of the Haitian people.
Et aujourd'hui, la République d'Haïti est dirigée par un seul homme qui s'est octroyé les attributions des pouvoirs législatifs et judiciaires en plus de celles du pouvoir exécutif.
Today, the Republic of Haiti is ruled by one man who has granted himself the power of the legislative and judicial branches in addition to those of the executive branch.
Pour 3 raisons principales, les élections ne peuvent avoir lieu en 2021 en Haïti.
There are 3 main reasons why elections cannot be held in Haiti in 2021.
Premièrement, l'État haïtien est dans l'incapacité de délivrer les cartes électorales.
First of all, the Haitian state is unable to issue the electoral cards to voters.
Deuxièmement, le Conseil électoral est illégitime. Ses membres n'ont pas prêté serment par devant la Cour de cassation et il est doté de mandat inconstitutionnel d'organiser un référendum.
The Electoral Council is illegitimate and its members have not been sworn in by the Haitian Supreme Court, and it has an unconstitutional mandate to organize a referendum.
Troisièmement, l'insécurité ne permettra ni aux candidats de mener campagne, ni aux électeurs de voter sans contrainte le jour du scrutin.
The current insecurity will not allow candidates to campaign or voters to cast their ballot without constraint on election day.
En effet, l'insécurité dans laquelle patauge le pays est caractérisée par des actes attentatoires aux vies et aux biens.
Indeed, the insecurity in the country is mere and characterized by acts of violence against life and property.
Pour l'année 2020 seulement, plus de 1085 personnes, dont 37 policiers, ont été assassinés.
In 2020 alone, more than 1,085 people, including 37 police officers, were assassinated.
En janvier et février 2021, au moins 65 personnes sont assassinées, dont 3 policiers.
In January and February 2021, at least 65 people were murdered, including 3 police officers.
En juin 2020, les gangs armés se sont fédérés avec la bénédiction du pouvoir en place.
In June 2020, the armed gangs federated with the blessing of the current government.
Et ils sont suffisamment influents pour nommer un directeur à la caisse d'assistance sociale, exiger et obtenir la révocation d'un ministre.
They are influential enough to appoint a director to the social assistance funds. The gang demand and obtain the dismissal of a minister.
De 2018 à 2020, au moins 10 massacres ont été perpétrés à Port-au-Prince, occasionnant l'assassinat de 343 personnes, la disparition de 98 autres et le viol collectif de 32 femmes.
From 2018 to 2020, at least 10 massacres were perpetrated in Port-au-Prince, resulting in the assassination of 343 people, 98 others disappeared, 38 women gang raped,
251 enfants sont devenus orphelins.
251 children became orphans.
Depuis 2020, 4 à 5 personnes sont enlevées chaque jour, parmi elles des femmes et des filles qui sont généralement victimes de viols collectifs.
Since 2020, 4 to 5 people are kidnapped every day, among them women and girls who are generally become victims of gang rape.
Des victimes relâchées ont affirmé avoir été kidnappées par des policiers en uniforme et transportées à bord de véhicules de l'État.
Released victims claim they were kidnapped by uniformed police and transported in government vehicles.
D'autres ont déclaré avoir remis les rançons à des personnes accompagnées de policiers.
Others said they handed over ransom to people accompanied by police officers.
Et des membres influents du pouvoir négocient et organisent le transport des otages.
Influential members of the government are negotiating and arranging the transportations of the hostages.
Par ailleurs, le pouvoir judiciaire haïtien est complètement dysfonctionnel.
Furthermore, the Haitian judiciary system is completely dysfunctional.
Les impacts de ce dysfonctionnement sont énormes sur la population carcérale, dont plus de 84% sont en attente de jugement.
The impact of this dysfunctionment is enormous on the prison population, more than 84% of whom are awaiting trial.
Les manifestations antigouvernementales sont systématiquement réprimées, alors que celles organisées par les gangs armés sont sécurisées par la police.
Anti-government demonstrations are systemically repressed, while those organized by armed gangs are secured by the police.
Malgré la fin de son mandat depuis le 7 février 2021, Jovenel Moïse refuse de partir.
Today, despite the fact that his mandate ended on February 7, 2021, Jovenel Moïse refused to leave office.
Entre-temps, il contrôle le pays
Meanwhile, he controls the country
avec son agence personnelle d'intelligence, sa coalition de gangs armés,
with his personal intelligence agency, his coalitions of armed gangs,
une brigade créée pour surveiller les aires protégées transformée en milices armées,
a brigade created to monitor protected areas transformed into armed militia,
une unité spécialisée de la police créée pour sécuriser les présidents mais acquise à sa cause,
a specialized police unit created to provide security for the president, but now this unit is committed to his cause,
une armée remobilisée et une police affaiblie et politisée.
a remobilized army, a weakened and politicized police force.
Sur la base de ce que nous venons de partager avec vous, nous demandons à l'administration Biden
Based on what we have shared with you, we call on the Biden administration to
d'écouter et de respecter les revendications de la société civile et reconnaître la fin du mandat de Jovenel Moïse.
listen and respect the Haitian civil society's demand and recognize that the mandate of former President Jovenel Moïse has ended.
De ne plus supporter un processus électoral qui débouchera à coup sûr sur une instabilité politique.
Stop supporting an electoral process that will lead to political instability.
De supporter au contraire des élections libres, honnêtes, avec un conseil électoral légitime issu d'un accord politique.
Instead, support free and fair election with a legitimate electoral council resulting from a political agreement.
De se démarquer du processus devant aboutir au référendum inconstitutionnel.
The US government must distance themselves from the process of an unconstitutional referendum.
De poursuivre les membres de ce régime impliqués dans des violations de droits humains, la corruption et le blanchiment des avoirs sur le sol américain.
prosecute members of this regime involved in human rights violations, corruption, money laundering on American soil,
d'enquêter sur les armes illégales en provenance des États-Unis et circulant sur le sol haïtien, car ces armes aggravent l'insécurité et sèment la terreur dans les cœurs des Haïtiens.
investigate the flow of illegal weapons from the US, which are easily smuggled into Haitian territory. These weapons amplify the insecurity and strike fear in the hearts of every Haitian.
Merci beaucoup. Nous sommes à votre disposition pour vos questions.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I now yield 5 minutes to Ambassador Pamela White.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having this hearing. My name is Pamela White, and I'm the former U.S. Ambassador to Haiti from 2012 to 2015. I first served in Haiti from 1995 to 1990. My first tour as a Foreign Service officer. I witnessed the removal of Baby Doc and the subsequent horror show that went on for years after his departure. Most of my career was working for USAID from 1978 to 2010 when I became ambassador to the Gambia. That is 30 plus years of development experience, including serving as USAID mission director in Mali, Tanzania, and Liberia. These are my opinions and not the USG's opinion. As you all know, the situation in Haiti is highly volatile. Every single day, there are reports of decapitations, rapes, and murders. Kidnappings are at an all-time high. The human rights situation is deplorable. 4 million Haitians are suffering food insecurity. More than half are living on less than $2.40 a day. There's a weak judiciary, a threatened press, and no parliament. In short, Haiti is once again a mess. With this background in mind, I will touch on two issues, the elections and aid. First, the elections. It is difficult for me to imagine having successful elections this year in Haiti. Putting aside for the moment the question of President Moïse, should he have left in February or should he leave next February? I don't know the answer, but I do not believe that right now the necessary institutions are in place to assure a smooth transition. The USG, the OAS, and the UN have all stated that Moïse's term ends in 22, but several Haitian constitutional experts, as well as Harvard, Yale, and NYU law school clinics disagree. The CEP was appointed last year. That CEP does not have representatives from organizations that are critical, like the church. The last CEP resigned en masse, refusing to serve under President Moïse. The Supreme Court refused to swear in the current members. I do not believe the current CEP can be considered legit. This can be quickly corrected if parties come to the table. I have been told that 2.8 million voters have been registered, but only 1.7 million cards have been issued. Over 6 million voters were registered in 2016. The current government says they have the capability to register 2 million voters a month, but they are currently falling way short. An impartial, neutral audit needs to happen yesterday. There's also the money problem. Last elections cost over $150 million. I wonder how international support there will be for elections that are so tainted. I do not see the USG giving $33 million as it did in 2016, considering the current chaos. The international community will have to draw some firm lines in the sand that will hold Haitian leadership accountable for both a smooth transition and vastly improved security. If lines are crossed, money will stop. Helen Lalim, the very talented UN Special Representative, said in her last report that above all else, a minimal consensus among relevant political stakeholders would greatly contribute to creating an environment conducive to the holding of a constitutional referendum and subsequent elections. Although I think the entire question of a referendum to change the Constitution is extremely dubious, I completely agree with the rest of her statement. If we do not get minimal consensus among the relevant actors, Haiti will not be able to pull off credible elections, period. Here's a few quick suggestions. If President Moïse will not step down, he should step aside. He must be completely transparent and honest. He must bring relevant actors to the table. A well-respected Haitian should be appointed prime minister. He or she should immediately dissolve the current CEP and call a summit with all relevant political actors to establish a legal CEP. I would hope the UN and the USG could both help fund such a summit and commit to acting as mediators if asked. The voter registration also needs immediate help. The new Prime Minister team will also need to articulate a security plan. If President Moïse stays in power, his job will be to maintain peace. Stop the brutal beatings and the gang violence. Start acting like a statesman. Let me quickly also touch on the topic of foreign aid. I believe Haitians desperately need humanitarian aid such as food aid and basic health care. USAID can deliver both even under the worst political conditions. But I do not believe that regular normal development activities can be carried out in the current violent atmosphere. Free and fair elections are important pieces to any democracy's complex puzzle, but having an election will not transform Haiti. It never has, and it never will. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. I want to thank all of the witnesses. You know, this is bipartisan witnesses, and all of them has basically just said, Haiti's a mess. The people are suffering. This has to stop. There's got to be some order. That's the reason why we're doing this hearing. And this committee is going to continue to look so that the people of Haiti get better. They deserve better. We've got to work collectively to do that. So now I'm going to recognize members for 5 minutes. And I just want to thank all of the witnesses for their testimony. It just breaks my heart listening, but no, making me more determined that we've got to do something. And we've got to do it collectively. I'm going to recognize members for 5 minutes each pursuant to the House rules. And all time yielded is for the purposes of questioning our witnesses. I'll recognize members by committee seniority, alternating between Democrats and Republicans. If you miss your turn, please let our staff know and we will come back to you. If you seek recognition, you must unmute your microphone and address the chair verbally and identify yourself so that we know who is speaking. I'll start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Let me start with Ms. Duyan. You know, there's a lot of skepticism among Haiti's civil society that the Moïse administration can preside over fair and credible elections. Tell me, what do you think? Do you consider the current Provisional Electoral Council to be independent, legitimate, and able to administer free, fair, and credible elections?
Thank you, Chairman Meeks. I don't recognize this CEP as legitimate to organize election. First of all, the way it was constituted, it doesn't reflect the Constitution, and the people who are involved were not sent by key sectors of civil society in Haiti. It was then presented at the Supreme Court, like it was supposed to do. This is an illegal CEP, and there is no way this CEP could organize fair, credible elections.
Thank you. Madam Ambassador White, do you agree?
100%.
Now, let me ask also, what role do you believe the multilateral groups like Core Group or CARICOM and other interested parties in the international community should play in Haiti? And how can the United States best engage with our international partners so that we, the international, are speaking with one voice, not divided? No, we can't be divided when it comes to Haiti. We've got to all speak with one voice and be clear about it.
You're speaking to me still?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The core group is essential to come together and speak with one voice. You're absolutely right. The United States government has always been, if not the leading voice, certainly one of the leading voices on that core group, because no one gives more to Haiti than the United States of America. in many, many ways, not just monetarily. But I think that the leadership we need to have at that core group meeting, we need to have a clear view of how we are going to articulate our policy for the next 18 months at least. And I think your leadership can help them define how to move forward. Because as I said in my statement, we need to have clear lines in the sand. If this doesn't happen, the money stops. We need to look at what our policies are going to be. I was reading about the UN and the US and the OAS all saying that they support Moise to stay for another year, but I didn't hear what the conditionality for that was. And I'd like to hear that articulated.
Thank you. Ms. Joseph, what about this constitutional referendum? Now, I've heard that part of the Constitution needs to be reformed, but what are your thoughts? Should there be a referendum in June, or should it not be? Are the people ready? Give me your thoughts on a constitutional referendum.
Chairman Mix, as a Haitian American woman, witnessing what's happening in the middle of this chaos, as you just heard from all those people, all those witnesses, for me, the answer is no. I do not believe a referendum for the Constitution right now is something that is going to make the changes that are needed. If the Constitution as is not being respected, what change will come from having a referendum in June in less than 6 months? So my answer is no. I think we should continue to push for a free elected, a system in Haiti at this moment. I personally do not think a referendum for the Constitution in June is warranted.
Thank you. And let me real quick go back to Ms. Duyan. What about this influx of returning Haitian, I think you would testify to that, of Haitian immigrants? How does that impact the Haitian economy, especially given a loss of remittances dollars, et cetera? What are some of the alternatives that you think that we should be looking at in the Biden administration other than deportations?
Okay, first of all, I have to mention, thank you, Chairman Meeks. I have to mention, since the political crisis keep getting worse, more and more people are migrating to the US illegally. And with COVID-19 and other problems, we've witnessed somehow a decrease in the amount of remittances that are being sent in Haiti. At some point with the checks, it increased, but later it decreased. But with the current economic situation in Haiti, even the same amount that the people used to send in Haiti is not enough. And with deportation, it's not going to help Haiti, because those people who fled, they were like fleeing the worsening living condition in Haiti, and sending them back in with an increase in crime level and a surge of kidnapping. I don't think it is the best thing to do for Haiti right now. And also, this is why it is urgent to restore peace and democratic order in Haiti, so we are not dealing with this kind of situation.
Thank you. My time has expired. I now recognize the ranking member, McCall, from the great state of Texas.
I thank the chairman from the great state of New York for his acknowledging me. And let me just first say, I agree with the chairman. These stories have been very compelling and quite honestly, very sad. It's a sad state of affairs. And I think that, Mr. Chairman, thanks for holding this hearing. I think it's called this to the light of members that had no idea that Haiti was in such bad shape. And I think we have a responsibility to do something about it, as does the United Nations and the OAS as well. My first question is to Ambassador White. In Mexico, we had the Merida initiative where we had financial assistance tied to metrics regarding governance and rule of law to help better shape the situation. And from the testimonies I heard, there really is no rule of law in Haiti right now. Can you tell us how we could effectuate this assistance better to get the situation under control.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I think we need, as I said again, however you want to call it, I call it drawing lines in the sand, but we need a very clear map of what we are expecting out of government in Haiti. And if we don't get what the minimum that we're expecting out of the government of Haiti, we need to have some conditionality. And I was explaining this the other day to one of my friends, and I was saying that the word conditionality linked to aid became a very dirty word in the late 1990s and early 2020s. It was like, give them the money, it's their country, let them do what they want to do. And I always believed, as being you say director, that no, you have to have conditions to aid. You as taxpayers expect something to come out of their hard-earned money, and we have to articulate exactly what that is, and that needs to happen.
I could agree with you more, and I think the taxpayers deserve that and want that. And otherwise, if you pour money into a corrupt government or system, it's not going to get the results that you're looking for. And then therefore waste the money. Let me ask you about the Haitian National Police. Previously, the military seemed to control, and there's a lot of corruption with the military in Haiti. And they one of the reforms I think that has been more positive is the Haitian National Police. Do you agree with that? And should we be doing more to help them?
Yes, when I left Haiti in 2015, let me tell you, I was very proud of the Haitian National Police. They had a good reputation. They were working with a lot of our people from South Palm and from different police forces in the United States, which were a great partnership. And I think that in New York, yes, New York, especially New York, by the way, Chairman Meeks, and I thought they were an organization that was relatively not corrupt and did a really good job with very little resources. I think we need to put more resources in the National Police, and I think we need more of that mentoring. I don't know if it's still ongoing, but we need more of it, because I've heard from my many Haitian friends that at least big portions of the police are becoming more and more corrupt, and that's really sad, because they were a very decent organization.
Yeah, I think we need to focus on that too. My last question to anybody on the panel. I think this election, one of the testimonies was $150 million to have a election down there. OAS is involved, United Nations and the United States. How can we use that 150 million wisely? And I don't think the president's going to step aside until his term is done. And I know, Ambassador White, that was your first premise, but I don't think that's going to happen. So short of that, what do we do with the $150 million to make sure this is free and fair to the most extent we can?
Thank you, Ranking Member Markle. If you allow, I want to answer this question.
Sure.
First of all, about the term of the president. His term ended last February 7, and about election with that amount of money, I think it will be better for the international community and anyone interested in funding election in Haiti to wait until fair election can happen in Haiti. At the present time, there is no possibility that we can have fair, credible, inclusive elections. If anyone spends money on organizing elections now, it will only lead to another crisis, because people won't be able to participate. And we have a very low turnover in the last election. Less than 30% of people participated in those elections. And if you have election with kidnappings and this crime level, I don't know many people will be able to join, to campaign, to participate in those elections. And I don't know who in the civil society is going to accept the result of those elections. And even if you spend this amount of money, I don't trust this government to be able to organize election when they can't even manage gas shortage in the country. How could they organize election? I don't trust them to do that.
Well, thank you, Emmanuel. I think that is the answer. I don't think we can have free and fair elections with the current president in office. And until he steps down, perhaps we should not be having an election until that time, it seems to me. So thanks for that clarification. That's I think, very helpful testimony. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the chair of the subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, Civilian Security, Migration, and International Economic Policy, and all the work that he's been doing on the subcommittee, particularly as it's focused on Haiti, Representative Albio Ceres of New Jersey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that you are holding this as a full committee hearing, because I see a lot of people are participating in this process, and people need to know what is going on in Haiti. You know, I visited Haiti a few years ago, and I met with the president. And back then, he told me point blank that he wanted to revive the military. And I said to him, with the needs that you have in this country, why would you want to revive the military? I said to him, look, Costa Rica doesn't have an army, and they're thriving. Why do you feel that Haiti needs an army? He said, well, it's the Constitution. The other thing, we visited the National Police. They were doing a great job then. But it seems to me that this president, step by step, has been creating the military, get rid of judges, create his own Central Intelligence so he can maintain himself in power. Now, my question to the panelists, how do we stop that? Because are the ambassadors of the country speaking up enough about it? Is the European Union speaking up about it? Are the neighboring countries speaking up about it? You know, we have invested a great deal of money in Haiti. And for this president to say that he needs a military, you know, to me, it was just ridiculous. So I was wondering, somebody can take that question? Touye?
I can certainly,
Miss,
Oui, s'il vous plaît, moi, qu'à répondre.
can I answer?
Merci en pile, Congressman Ceres. Et nous pensons que effectivement, question journée aujourd'hui, qui a soulevé là, c'est des questions qui sont très importantes.
Today, the questions that are being raised are very important questions.
Premièrement, il faut que nous disions que c'est le régime PHTK qui a décidé unilatéralement pour remobiliser l'armée.
First, we must acknowledge that it was the PHTK regime that unilaterally agreed to remobilize the Haitian army.
Or, comme nous connaissons, l'armée a été impliquée dans une bonne violation de droits humains et pas de jamais gagné des poursuites qui étaient faites pour être capable de juger si là qui était impliqué dans la violation de droits humains.
We also know the former Haitian army was involved in grave human rights violations. There was nothing done to hold those accountable against the crime they committed against the Haitian population.
Deuxièmement, journée aujourd'hui, nous avons une police qui lui-même qui affaiblit parce que l'autorité l'État a décidé pour renforcer gang armé au détriment de la police là.
Today, we have a weakened police force because the government has decided to support armed gangs within the country instead of providing resources to the Haitian police.
Okay.
Gang armé, c'est eux-mêmes qui appliquent, par exemple, que ils gagnent suffisamment d'armes, ils gagnent plus d'armes pour avec la police là.
The current gangs we have in the country have more weapons than the police forces themselves.
Well, other Ambassador White, can you tell me if other ambassadors...
Et c'est même Jean Toul, on a parlé de questions qui ont rapport avec mandat. C'est même Jean Toul, on a parlé sur question en rapport avec mandat, par exemple, de président de facto Jovenel Moïse qui finit. Et journée aujourd'hui, à l'éclair, c'est constitution qui dit que mandat fini. Et même calcul que l'ité utilisé pour te dire que mandat sénateur fini, c'est même calcul ça que société a utilisé pour les tout pour dire que mandat fini.
Today, when we are talking about the mandate of former President Jovenel Moïse, he used the Constitution to say that the mandate of the parliaments ended. Today, the Haitian population is using the same calculation to say that his mandate has ended.
All right. Ambassador White, can you just speak to the question of have other ambassadors spoken up about what is going on in Haiti? Ambassador White?
Unmute, Ambassador White. Please unmute.
Sorry. Yes, they have certainly spoken out against about all the violence. They've spoken out about human rights abuses. What I'm not sure about is, what are the consequences? You can say, well, this is horrible and the situation is horrible and Haiti's a mess, but what exactly do we do about it? So I have not seen that articulated, and it might have been articulated. I've not personally seen it. And just, if you will, this question of the army came up when I was ambassador there, and they kept saying, we want an army, we want an army, and I kept saying, why would you want an army? It just seems ridiculous.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Chairman. I'm finished. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back.
Ooh,
I now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, and Global Human Rights, Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this important hearing. You and the ranking member and Albie Osiris, Chairman, have asked, I think, a lot of the important questions about the political leadership. I would like to just focus for a moment with our distinguished witnesses on, we all remember in 2010 when 200,000 people died from the earthquake, and 10 months later, there was a horrible outbreak of cholera. And for about a century, Haiti had not known cholera. And after a great deal of investigations, Ban Ki-moon finally came to the conclusion from an expert panel that it was brought to Haiti by the peacekeepers from Nepal. It was a strain that was found in Nepal, and their camp was so, unfortunately, unsanitary. Their waste led to contaminated water, and about 800,000+ people got sick. 10,000 Haitians died. And there were commitments made. I know CDC worked very hard on this, as did our U.S. government, State Department, and the USAID, to make sure that sanitation was improved. But I wonder, just snapshot, has it been improved to the point where there is robust sanitary conditions in Haiti as a result of lessons learned, so that there's never again, waterborne illnesses like the cholera that was taken to so many people? Secondly, there was talk of reparations, and there was even a lawsuit, sadly, that was dismissed by a federal judge about reparations, because this had a causation, and it was UN peacekeepers. And I'm wondering if anyone would like to speak to that issue. And finally, on human trafficking, Mr. Chairman, Haiti is a tier 2 country, as per the last report by TIP, Trafficking in Persons. But there's a very, very ongoing serious problem of children being put into forced labor, domestic servitude. In 2014, Haiti passed a law, and I know the ambassador knows about that, on TIP. Enforcement has been lackluster, to say the least. There were no prosecutions during the reporting period for the last TIP report, the 2020 report. And I'm just wondering if our distinguished witnesses could shed light on the status of victims and the prosecutions of traffickers and the prevention strategies in Haiti. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield to the answers.
Thank you, Congressman Smith. I don't have enough data to comment on improvement in terms of sanitation, and number in case of human trafficking. But what I can say is that there is no real prosecution of criminals in Haiti at this time. There is a lot of impunity, and even people who are involved in massacres are not pursued. They do not face charge. They are not held accountable. So I won't even mention for other cases. And this is directly linked to corruption, rampant corruption and impunity in Haiti. The overall situation is that if we want to tackle some specific problem like human trafficking and even bad living condition, it has a lot to see with leadership and the governance of the country. And for the past 4 years, Haiti has been in a crisis of leadership with a president that himself is accused of being involved in corruption. Therefore, there is little chance that we could see any improvement in terms of prosecution against people involved in human trafficking or any other type of crime.
Thank you. Anybody else like to respond?
Thank you so much, Emanuela. This is Berlin, Congressman Smith. The reality-
Moi, ta aimé répondre, s'il vous plaît. Merci en pile, le Congressman Smith.
The reality is, as we know, in Haiti, when we speak about the cholera, when we see what has happened, nothing has been done. No reparation has been provided for those impacted community members. It is unacceptable to see how not only, you know, the what we call the corruption in Haiti, but the way that the international community always deals with issues in Haiti, whether it is things that are happening on the ground, such as the chaos, or even things such we see the UN worker unfortunately bought cholera due to lack of sanitation, due to lack of infrastructure to make sure that the people that we are serving are protected. So this is a clear example of how negative the entire international community, including, as we can see, the UN treats Haiti when it comes to those type of issues.
Thank you.
Merci en pile, Congressman
The
Smith.
gentleman's time has expired. Hold up. The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Representative Brad Sherman of California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for holding this hearing. Haiti and the United States have a long relationship. It is, after all, our first sister republic here in the Western Hemisphere. Unfortunately, Haiti is one of the poorest nations in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti has only 14,000 to 15,000 police in its Haitian National Police, which is less than international standards would call for the policing of such a populated country. Between 2008 and 2019, there were 3,200 Indian policemen who were there as part of the UN. And then our colleague Chris Smith points out how UN peacekeepers from Nepal were a problem for Haiti. So I'll ask first Ms. Doyen, would international peacekeepers or international police assistance be helpful in providing for the rule of law in Haiti?
Thank you, Congressman Sherman. Of course, help is always welcome, but I'll say that we need to focus more on improving the capacity of the Haitian National Police, because what I notice is that every time we have foreigners coming, helping, when they leave, the local staff is not better off. We don't see any real improvement. It's like they come here, do the job, but they don't really reinforce the capacity of the police. And at this time, the Haitian National Police is suffering from bad reputation, and some policemen are denouncing bad working condition. They need increase in their salary. They need health care. They need a better environment to work, and we need even more police officers. So if I could recommend something, I'll recommend that we work on the Haitian National Police, ensure that every police officer can take care of his family and they can get perfect training instead of bringing more police officers from anywhere.
The written reports say that there have been 251 COVID deaths in Haiti That seems like a very low number. Ms. White, should I believe that number, or is it dramatically understated?
Yeah, I do think you should believe the number. Now, I can't quite figure it out myself because there's at least 8 or 9 times that many of COVID deaths right across the border in the DR. And as we all know, Haiti does not have exactly the most efficient healthcare system in the world. But for whatever reason, a very, very trusted doctor from, that has ties to Cornell, that's a Haitian doctor, has confirmed to me that the number of COVID deaths have been relatively low. And this is true in Africa too.
While I have you, I've got one more question. That is, Haiti is one of the 15 nations to recognize Taiwan. We have the Beijing offering free assistance, concessionary loans. Is Haiti better off sticking with Taiwan? And should we be concerned with China trying to develop a relationship with the government of Haiti?
Is this for me again?
Yep.
I don't know the extent of what the Taiwanese is doing in Haiti anymore, to tell you the honest about it, so I can't really comment on that. But I have seen the Chinese slowly creeping in all across Africa and Haiti, and I personally do not think this is a good thing.
Yeah. They've sent hundreds of thousands of face masks, thousands of tons of rice. That is to say, Taiwan has to one of, I guess, there's only 15 nations with whom they have a relationship. Finally, for whichever witness, I've got only 29 seconds. That's not enough time for anybody to answer a question. I'll yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, Central Asia, and Nonproliferation, Representative Steve Shabbat of Ohio, for 5 minutes.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. My screen just went froze.
I hear you, Mr. Shabbat. I do hear you. We hear you.
That wasn't a very judicious time for this thing to freeze. I'm not sure if anybody can hear me or not.
We hear you, Mr. Shabbat.
It's frozen here.
Okay.
Well,
Mr. Shabbat, can you hear me?
maybe we can come back to me because I assume you're probably not hearing me.
We'll come back to Mr. Shabbat. So I'll go out now to Representative Brian Mast of Florida. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. And thank you to our witnesses for participating today as well. My question goes to this, and it's open to any of our witnesses. It's a general question.
Back 29 seconds. I've never done that before. Rarely.
Mr. Sherman, put yourself on mute, please.
I think he muted. I think it was just a quick error. We'll get over that one. My question goes to our witnesses generally. And I'd ask for reflection on America and overcoming our challenges with the inception of our nation and the founding of our independence and creating of our democratic systems that we rely on here, and what it is that individuals just off my shore as a Floridian see that draw to come to here in the United States of America, of which I have a large Haitian community as well within my area of South Florida. What do you think can be learned and brought back to Haiti to help replicate what it is that is drawing people here to our shores?
Thank you so much, Congressman Matt. This is Gerline. I like to take part of the question. First of all, we always talk about Haiti being the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but we always fail to look at the root causes of that fact. Going back 200 years within the relationships and the fact that from the very inception of Haiti, France forced with the international powers for Haiti to pay, because we freed ourselves, to pay France for lost wages of slavery that was created on our backs. So these are the very root causes of Haiti being in the state that it is. So we see from there the continued, inaction, misaction, and straight out abuse of Haiti, in Haiti, on Haiti. And we see that people leaving, as I previously mentioned, Haiti was not a sending country. Haiti was a receiving country, lighting the way for freedom, not only for Haiti, but other places. Haiti was the only country that provided citizenship for the Jews to escape so that they can get freedom. So when we come back to what we experienced earlier this year in this great United States of ours, and I must say that I am both a proud Haitian woman and a proud American woman. So there is a lot to be learned. There's a lot that can be used to provide assistance and provide relief in Haiti. I believe.
Thank you for your response, ma'am. I just want to pause you and ask you to continue. What is that piece to be learned? That's what I want to get at. What is that piece to be learned that you just said there is a lot to be learned? What is that needs to be brought back to Haiti to result in success?
Not to be brought back in Haiti per se, but to work with Haiti to be able to create a sustainable, solution. When we look into what we are experiencing here in the United States, how do we work with the Haitian people to implement those things that can be successful so that they themselves can be able to lead for themselves?
Very important point. I want us to work with the Haitian people, and I think we do that very well. And there's definitely room for improvement, but I know as a Floridian, this is something that touches us very close to home. I would never, however, say that it's not more important, or rather that it isn't more important that Haitians individually within Haiti look in the mirror and say, we can't rely on America, we can't rely on France, we can't rely on others. We're hopeful for their assistance, but we have to look in the mirror and say, how do we do this? And that's what I hope we can really get to a root of, is what does Haiti have to look in the mirror and decide is going to occur there, whether they get the assistance from Haiti, from the US or anybody else. What is it that they can look in the mirror and do to correct what is missing there? And in that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time, and I have nothing to yield back, but thank you for the time.
Can I add something? Can I reply to this?
Has expired. The gentleman time.
Chairman allows you.
No, I cannot. We got a lot of members waiting to ask questions.
Because this is so important.
We will get to it. I'll get it when someone asks you the question next, maybe Mr. Connolly or someone else. But I got to yield the time now to the president of the NATO Parliamentarian Assembly, Representative Jerry Connolly of the state of Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel. Part of this discussion, it seems to me, we've sort of ignored the American historical context with respect to Haiti. And Ms. Douillon, you may want to comment on that, as well as Ambassador White. The American history with Haiti is wretched. After brutal French colonialism was overturned, we refused to recognize a Black, formerly enslaved government in Haiti because it threatened slavery in America in the 19th century. We refused commerce. We denied them access to trade and investment credits, and helped impoverish the country and keep it impoverished. We've invaded the country. We've occupied the country. We've installed governments and taken down governments and reinstalled governments. And maybe I could start with you, Ambassador White, because surely you're aware of that historical perspective. But it's not like the current condition of Haiti is intrinsically dysfunctional. There are historic reasons why it is in the condition it's in, and a lot of it can be traced to American policy and intervention. Very little of it good over the panoply of history. So given that, shouldn't we tread a little lightly on things like conditionality and dictating terms of what Haiti needs to do? And how best can the United States try to influence positive and desirable outcomes in terms of democracy, in terms of lifting people out of poverty, in terms of trying to promote a more robust economic growth that benefits everybody? Ambassador White, and then Mr. Wyoming.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have 3-4 hours of discussion because it's a long one. But you're right. The history between the United States and Haiti is a love-hate affair and has been for a long time. I distinctly remember, like I was saying, in 1986 when baby Doc left. And I remember sitting in the embassy and the Ambassador Adams, who was a fabulous ambassador, but he said, we're going to have elections. And I remember saying, elections? There's no political party, there's no judiciary, there's no police except the Tonto Makuts. How in the heck are we going to have elections? And I go, that's what we do for a democracy. And I think, you know, elections ever since have been, you know, difficult. But I know this idea of conditionality is one that raises eyebrows, but I do think that if we are not saying clearly what it is we are expecting of the government of Haiti, then we don't have a roadmap, and we desperately need a roadmap. Now, we might be doing that. I am not in on any discussions. I'm not part of the core group. No one calls me from Haiti, well, my Haitian friends, but not my American friends for advice. So I don't know. We may be doing more of that, but they deserve to know what they're getting for their money.
Thank you. Ms. Douillon, I know you wanted to respond to both Mr. Mass and hopefully my observation as well.
Thank you, Congressman Connolly. I totally agreed with the fact you shared about the history between US and Haiti. And it's true that it has been complicated. And to reply to Congressman Mass' comment, Haiti is not waiting for the US, France, or any other country in the international community. We've already decided what we want to do. What we are asking is for the international community to listen and respect our choice. We have a president whose term ended last February. He has benefited from the support of the OAS, the US State Department, and despite the fact that most of Haiti civil society acknowledged that his term ended according to the Constitution. This is what we are facing now. And this is a perfect example of when we do not listen to Haitian, we cannot judge them later and blame them for the outcome. And it's also important to differentiate between the people who always stand for the country and versus the elected officials who are usually corrupt and are minding their own business and are defending their own interests, usually with the support of the international community, who is always saying that they are supporting institutions while they are supporting people who are often decried by their own population. This is the perfect case study now with Jovenel Moïse. For more than 2 years, people have been calling on him to resign. Now, we are not even calling on him to resign because his term ended. We call him to vacate office. And he has the support of the international community. We want to end with all those the corruption and impunity. We want to end with the old practices. And so many people do not want to give us this chance to decide for ourselves. And this is why we are saying we are having this hearing now. This is our point. This is what we are defending. The right to decide for ourselves, and for the international community to listen and follow the Haitian civil society lead, because we know better, we know what's good for us, we know where we made mistakes in the past, we are learning from this, and it's trial and error, it's a young democracy, we are learning and we are adjusting, and now it's a turning point, and this is why we need solidarity, not the kind of comment like this.
Thank you for that. The gentleman's
Dr. Turloff, I yield back.
The gentlemen, time has expired. I think we're still working to get Mr. Shabbat on camera. So while we continue to do that, I'll now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, Civilian Security, Migration, International Economic Policy, Representative Mark Green of Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Meeks and Ranking Member McCall for holding this hearing on Haiti. It's an honor to serve as the ranking member on Western Hemisphere, and obviously this focus on Haiti is a critical aspect of our subcommittee. I thank Chairman Cyrus for his comments as well, his wisdom and experience. When I founded my medical foundation, Align MD Foundation, and then Two Rivers Medical Foundation, we sent medical mission trips to Haiti, and the country was then challenged with poverty, rule of law issues, and governance issues, and unfortunately the situation is only worse now. It's tragic for many reasons. History makes it even more so. Haiti's first constitution was influenced by our own Alexander Hamilton, who grew up in the Caribbean himself. Unfortunately, pervasive corruption, desperate poverty have long plagued the country. It remains one of the poorest nations in the Caribbean, lagging far behind its neighbors in basic measures of economic and political well-being. The Haitian people need and deserve better. As a neighbor, friend, and partner, we should do what we can. But as we have all noted today, it's sadly an uphill battle. The turmoil and instability, including the recent prison break, underscore the absence of the rule of law. Haiti ranks toward the bottom of many international comparisons for transparency, economic development, and ease of doing business. Sadly, recent events have shown us that Haiti still has a long way to go. My questions today are really for anyone who wants to chime in. We're hearing that the prisons in Haiti are now at 384% capacity, and my first thought is that some of these arrests may very well be politically motivated, but we also are seeing large increases in violent crime. Can you share with us, anyone of the witnesses, about the state of criminal justice in Haiti and what portion of those criminals are actually criminals versus political prisoners, and also, the status of the prisons? They're so full. How is that impacting criminal justice?
Merci en pile, Congressman Mark Green. Moi, ap répondre une question qui gen rapport avec prison yo, et effectivement, ça n'a commencé par dire, c'est que journée jodi,
Congressman Green. We want to take your questions regarding the prison system in Haiti.
et ça n'a commencé par dire, c'est que journée jodi, moun yo ap viv nan prison dans des conditions inhumaines et dégradantes.
The people who are incarcerated are living in inhuman condition.
Nous genyen yon prison qui capable accueillir pour pipiti 3000 moun.
The current prison that we have can hold about 3,000 people.
Et journée jodi a genyen environ 12,000 moun qui nan prison.
And today we have 12,000 people incarcerated.
Donc nous ka imaginer dans qui condition moun sa yo ap viv.
So then you can just imagine the deplorable condition that these inmates are in.
Genyen tout au niveau de dysfonctionnement système judiciaire là, en pile violation droit à garantie judiciaire qui a fait.
And also, given the dysfunctionment of the judiciary system, there is a lot of violations of the rights of those inmates that are occurring on a regular basis.
84% moun qui nan prison yo, j'en so di ça attend jugement, gen nan yo qui genyen plus passé 10 ans en attente de jugement.
Like I said earlier, 84% of the incarcerated populations are awaiting trial. There are people in there who's been incarcerated for 10 years and have not seen a judge.
Et journée jodi a, ça pi effrayant pour nous, c'est que genyen effectivement des prisonniers politiques, des moun que pouvoir en place là a arrêté à cause de position politique, opinion politique.
The worst thing for us today is that, yes, indeed, we have political prisoners. There are people who are incarcerated because of their political belief and their stand against this government.
Et là, nous comprendre que pendant toute année, ça, y a des gens qui arrêtés en prison sans que yo pas jugé et que kounya là, yo utilisé pour yo mettre des gens en prison pour opinion yo, donc nous comprendre que nous avons raison pour nous très inquiets.
So think about someone who spent 10 years in prison without appearing before a judge, and now individuals who are also being incarcerated for their political belief, what that situation is like. It is worsening daily.
Et malheureusement, malgré toute promesse que l'autorité de l'État a fait, il n'y a pas jamais arrivé résoudre le problème de détention préventive illégale et arbitraire là. Merci.
Unfortunately, no matter what promises the government has made, they have done nothing to resolve the issue of prolonged detentions for those inmates. Thank you.
If I could, I'd also like to ask the ambassador if she might share a little bit of her perspective on the spillover effects, what's going on in Haiti, how it's spilling over in the region, the rest of the Caribbean, and particularly neighboring Dominican Republic.
Ambassador White, please turn on your camera and off mute. Ambassador White still there with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I've got like 3 devices going here and they're all running out of power. Let me just go over here. Yeah, there's always spillover in the region. I mean, the DR, has a booming economy, and the Haitians are going back and forth over the border every day. And what's worrying me more, and would worry me if I was still the ambassador there, is the amount of the huge increase in Haitians trying to get to the United States. And, they use, means to get there that are highly dangerous. They die all the time. And the only way to stop immigration, whether it's from Haiti or Guatemala or wherever, Mexico, is to create better conditions in the country so they don't want to leave. And so the violence that is going on in Haiti right now, the lack of rule of law, the lack of human rights is driving Haitians out of the country to almost anywhere else they can do to get any kind of opportunity for their families. And then in my statement, I said it's very hard to do regular development activities in the midst of a violent country. So, just one feeds off the other. And that's why it's just so critical that the human rights situation, the violence, the gangs, that situation has got to be looked at immediately. I don't think you can do anything else until you stop that, including elections.
I believe it's expired. Thank you, Chairman.
I now recognize the chair of the Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, and Global Human Rights, Representative Karen Bass from California.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually want to continue right with the ambassador right where she was going, because I understood what you said in terms of the gangs and all of that. The question is, what should we do? I know that we've mentioned the police, but it's my understanding that the people we have trained, be it the police or the military, then are the ones that shot live rounds into the protesters, and it's questionable as to whether or not they were colluding with the government. So the question to you is, what can we do as the United States? And then when you were ambassador, I know that you facilitated a number of rounds of negotiations between conflicting parties. And I want to know, based on your time there, what lessons learned? What could you have done to have prevented what you saw at the time, and what should we be doing now? Are you able to?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, go ahead. I don't want to lose my time with her technical problems. Can we?
I've got like 3 going.
Your time is held until such time.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now I hear you.
You want me to talk really fast?
Yes, go now.
Okay, go. So yes, I had lots and lots of meetings with the opposition, even to the point of getting attacked by mobs. I remember, if you're not bringing the opposition to the negotiating table, then you can't make progress. And I have no idea. I presume that they're doing that all the time. You got to get out of your office into their offices and open up the dialogue. I just assume that that's being done. I do not know. But it's a good question about the police. That I think that we can't give up on the police. We've invested millions of dollars in the police. They can be reinforced, they can be, they were in a very good position. We've got to get.
Well, I realize we've invested a lot of money, but if our investment results in shooting innocent people and colluding with the existing government, that doesn't sound like a good return on investment to me. So I'm just wondering if you have a thought. I have a couple of other questions for our other witnesses, but if you have a thought as to what we can do differently. What did you learn during that time? What can we do differently? I don't want to reinforce an abusive.
Yeah, right. I'm with you. Yeah, gotcha. Well, I like I said, we got to tell them to root out the bad actors. I mean, you're right. They've been seen shooting into crowds. Root out the bad actors. We did that before. We did that. There were bad actors when I was there too, and we had this fabulous New York policemen that would come down and they would do audits. They would do interviews. They would do training, and
Okay.
I just think we have to go back to that.
All right, thank you, Madam Ambassador. Let me move on to Ms. Duyan. And one, it is clear we don't need to have a referendum for the Constitution. The elections are going to be shaky. So the question is, what should we do? Not change the Constitution, postpone the elections? What is it? And I also believe very deeply that we need to address root causes. But for right now, if no election, then what?
Thank you, Congresswoman Bass. First of all, what you can do is cancel that CP. Stop. It recommend. It's not up to you to cancel it. You have to recommend.
What?
I said that you have to cancel the CEP, but I correct my language and I said it's not up to you to cancel it. It's to not support Jovenel Moïse with that CEP. The CEP is the electoral council.
Okay.
We cannot continue with an illegal electoral council. We cannot have a referendum that is illegal. And we have to listen to civil society. And the solution now is, since the term of the president ended last month, we have to constitute a non-partisan, consensus-based team that is capable of leading the country, organize fair election, restore peace, improve the overall security conditions.
Do you have respected leaders that if the president was called on to step aside, are there respectable unifying leaders that we could call for, should be a part of that team that you just mentioned?
Of course, it would be a disaster if there were no qualified, serious, and non-corrupt Haitians.
Qualified people. The question is,
serious and non-corrupt people. Yes, there exist people like this exist. There are many people like this, and actually there is a consensus among civil society that we can have such team. All we need to do is to have Jovenel Moïse to vacate.
My time has run out, but can you tell us who those people are, what the team would be? And you don't have to answer right this question second, but can you send it to us?
I cannot name anyone because of the current situation in Haiti. I'm afraid if I name them now, they might be arrested.
All right.
The gentlelady's time has expired. I now recognize Representative Andy Barr from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciate your leadership on this issue and bringing this issue to the attention of our committee. It's such an important issue, and I represent in central Kentucky a faith community that has invested considerable time and resources in mission trips to Haiti. They bring back beautiful stories of wonderful people, yes, impoverished people, people who are struggling, but wonderful people who deserve better. And so many churches around this country have sponsored mission trips similar to those of my constituents, and we want the best for the people of Haiti. And the very regrettable track record of human rights violations and violence and corruption is obviously something we're all interested in. But let me start by asking Ambassador White kind of a fundamental question, which is, aside from the obvious humanitarian interest that we have in improving the conditions in Haiti, what would you say is, if any, the strategic national security interest of the United States in that country? And is it the historic connection between Haiti and Taiwan and potentially countering a Chinese Communist Party Belt and Road Initiative in Haiti?
Yeah, well, that's a real possibility. But I think more, more to the point is that if we don't develop Haitians and give Haitians a decent quality of living, including giving them something to do, employment and basic health care and human rights, that we're going to find them on our doors in huge numbers, and we just can't afford to do that.
Let me ask you a question about the comment that you made. I really appreciated, Ambassador, about conditionality with foreign aid, and Mr. Connolly's recitation of American history with respect to Haiti. The American people, American taxpayers, not just in terms of these mission trips, but the taxpayers deserve substantial credit and generosity here. What I'm reading is just since the earthquake alone, the United States taxpayer has invested $5.1 billion, and since 2011, USAID $1.8 billion, $100 million in 2020 alone. I would just argue, and Ambassador, I invite your feedback. If U.S. foreign aid was the answer to Haiti's many problems, then those problems would have been solved a long time ago. I mean, there's absolutely no shortage of American and international funding here. It's just been so badly mismanaged and subject to corruption. And so please amplify your testimony about the critical importance of conditionality associated with any additional taxpayer investment in Haiti in terms of anti-corruption efforts.
Yeah, people use a lot, and I must say that after the earthquake, we had about $2 billion after the earthquake. It killed 300,000 people. I mean, everything was gone. The roads were gone. The airport was gone. And I mean, people kept saying, but you had $2 billion. And I said, I needed $20 billion to rebuild the nation after an earthquake of that size. So although it looks like a tremendous amount of money, it's, to rebuild from nothing, believe me, we did a fantastic job. We did get Haiti together again. 50% of Americans gave something out of their pocket to help make that happen. And by the way, those religious NGOs get a bad name in Haiti, but thank God for the religious NGOs who are doing a fabulous job down there.
And reclaiming my time, I don't have much time left, Ambassador White, but I do want to follow up on Representative Sherman's important question about Taiwan. Are we seeing an active Belt and Road Initiative from the Chinese and post-pandemic Chinese malign influence in the Caribbean impacting Haiti in a way that would, separate Haiti as an ally of Taiwan and as one of only 15 countries maintaining official recognition with Taiwan? Is there any information you can give us on that?
I'm sorry, but there really isn't. I do not know what Taiwan's up to. I don't.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the hearing. It's very illuminating, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the chair of the subcommittee, Middle East, North Africa, and Global Counterterrorism, Representative Ted Deutsch from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for calling this important hearing. Thanks to all the witnesses for your candid and powerful testimony. I share the concern several of my colleagues have already expressed over the current situation in Haiti. And as a representative of South Florida, as my colleague from South Florida, Mr. Mass, mentioned a little while ago, this is an issue that hits close to home for so many in the Haitian diaspora community in my district. And I'd like to start by continuing the conversation about protocol concerns for the proposed elections. I think we can all agree elections are sorely needed. We all agree that the Haitian people deserve free, fair, and credible elections. And I have heard the concerns of our witnesses today that the current proposed CEP is illegitimate, even illegal. And I've heard similar concerns from Haiti's civil society and from the diaspora community in my district. So, Ms. Auguste, in your view, are there any reforms that would make the current Provisional Electoral Council as proposed by the administration, independent, legitimate, and able to administer free, fair, and credible elections. Ms. Auguste.
Yes. Yeah. Merci en pile, Congressman Dutch. Et pour nous-mêmes, li clair que journée jodi a élection pas qu'à réaliser Jean l'a fait là. Pour qui ça? Pour toute raison que nous sommes avancé là yo, qui gagne pour ouais avec toute irrégularité de dire.
Thank you, Congressman Dutch. With regard to the current CEP, it is not possible to have election with this illegal CEP, and we have already enumerated the various reasons why that cannot happen.
Mais tout à l'heure, elle m'a parlé de insécurité. Moi, t'as aimé mettre un accent sur information qui va permettre nous plus comprendre ce qui a passé dans le pays.
Earlier, when I was talking about insecurity, I would like to add a few points for you to better understand what's going on in the country.
Journée jodi a département l'Ouest avec département Artibonite représentait 60% électorat haïtien.
Today, the West Department and the Artibonite Department represent 60% of the Haitian electorate.
Or, gagné en pile dans circonscription ça yo qui contrôlé par gang armé qui a la solde de pouvoir en place là.
The majority of these voters are being housed in the same place where there are many gangs that are associated with the current government.
Donc, ça veut dire tout candidat qui pallier à gang pouvoir en place pas capable de mener campagne.
That also means that all candidates who are not associated with those gangs and the government will not be able to go into those neighborhoods to campaign.
Pendant 2 ans, l'État haïtien lui fait 3 millions de cartes électorales et lui distribuait moins que 2 millions.
Within 2 years, the government made 3 million electoral cards. So far, they have distributed less than 2 million.
Or, ils supposé faire 7 500 000 cartes pour électeurs et électrices.
They were supposed to have done 7,500,000 cards for the voters to be able to participate in the election process.
Si élection prévue pour août 2021, si élection prévue, excusez-moi, pour novembre 2021, ça veut dire qu'en août 2021, il faut que fin distribuer toutes cartes ça.
If we are saying that election will take place in September, that will mean in August, all the electoral cards have to be distributed.
Ça veut dire que c'est un bagage qui est impossible, l'État haïtien pas capable faire.
It is virtually impossible within the current situations for the Haitian government to realize that.
Et enfin, c'est lui-même.
Ms. Auguste, Ms. Auguste, I appreciate that. I just have a bit, excuse me, a bit more time. So let me just, if I may, thank you. And sorry, everyone. And I want to just, given what you've just said, Ms. Auguste, I just want to address the position that's been emphasized by some of our witnesses and members here today, which is that any election or referendum that is overseen by the Moise administration would automatically be seen by the Haitian people as illegitimate. We have seen on the ground, I've heard firsthand, human rights groups and opposition leaders maintaining that Moise's term ended February 7th and an interim government is necessary to organize elections. Now, the question, Ambassador White, that I have for you is, if the Provisional Electoral Council cannot meet the standard of being free, fair, and credible, but the current president does not step down, how can Congress, the Biden administration, and the international community play a responsible role in ensuring that any election that is held is credible and legitimate, and in facilitating the public acceptance of the results, and in mediating between the Moise administration and the opposition? That's what we're trying to do. I think that's what we need to do. Ambassador?
Yes, well, as I said in my testimony, I think that it would be nice if he would step down, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think that we sort of put him aside at the best of, in the best of all worlds, and we have a prime minister appointed that is non-corrupt, that is not from the political sector, that's not from the private sector. There are several really good candidates. I'm not going to name them, but there are several. And then we have this summit that we put out the old CEP. We have a summit where the actors come back to the table and we discuss how we can get the right representation in order to have a CEP that is credible. I mean, that is one solution that I can see happening within the very near future. I think the problem with transitional governments is then we're in that mess again, and that slows down everything again. It's not that in fact, I wrote a piece, or I talked to a piece in the New Yorker a couple of years ago where I said, I think that's exactly what we need. But I think right now we could use the prime minister option.
Thank you very much. I think my time has expired. Thanks, Ambassador. Thanks to all the witnesses. Mr. Chairman, thanks for this very important hearing today. I yield back.
That is right. The gentleman's time has expired. I'm going to, after I recognize the next member, I'm going to ask Representative Levin to chair the meeting briefly, as I have to step away to another briefing. But I shall be back shortly. But Representative Levin will chair. I now recognize Representative Greg Stubbe of Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are for Ambassador White. Haiti's porous border with the Dominican Republic is extremely vulnerable to illicit trade. Haiti's maritime borders also remain virtually unregulated, which contributes to economic insecurity. How can the Haitian government increase customs control at its borders?
Oh boy, good question. Very good question. We worked so much when I was there, and we were making progress. A lot of consulting with people that had set up custom border patrols in the United States, and we were making some real progress. But then the funding ran out, and I think it all just went backwards. But you know, you can set up honest custom control across along the Haitian border if you have enough money to do it, and that's the big problem. And you know, especially U.S. Custom Patrol people were incredibly knowledgeable and incredibly generous with their time and helping us and advising us. And I think that if we could get that back on track again, it would be fabulous and needed.
Well, could you describe how serious this problem is to Haiti's future development prospects?
You know, I have not been to Haiti in 3 years. I don't know what's going on right now. I could certainly tell you what was going on when I was there, but the migration of workers and the migration of goods, and you know, even there was an enormous scare about the migration of disease, is something all that really needs to be looked at. And at least during my tenure, there was enormous problems.
So what could the Biden administration do to help build up border security there?
Yeah, I think we should go. I mean, what we would do, you know, was really quite a good strategy, and I think we could go back to it very easily. And that is building up you know, structures and training. And it, you know, not only was it great because it was going to increase border security, but it also gave an opportunity for wonderful employment opportunities.
Adam Hoffner of the U.S. Border Patrol Miami sector stated, and I quote, "We continuously warn migrants about the dangers associated with traveling by sea. Smuggling organizations are not concerned with the safety of the people they are smuggling. Rather, they continue to put the lives of migrants at risk." What could the Biden administration do to address this issue?
Well, you know, it all goes back about the core reasons that, you know, why are people leaving Haiti to start with? And, you know, we went through a period when I was ambassador, the migration to the United States was almost zero. It was very seldom, and, you know, and that's when we were having a lot of development dollars and we were pumping a lot of money into the economy, and lots of jobs were opening up in South and we were paying people to move the rubble and make new roads. And so if Haitians, you know, the whole answer is that Haitians don't want to migrate.
Okay, if there's any Republicans, I'm happy to yield time if they want more time. If not, I will yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Representative Stubbe. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Representative Wild, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I'd like to direct my first question to Ambassador White. We've been hearing a lot of frustration about the current state of things and money that continues to flow to Haiti and so forth. But I want to take a little bit of a historical tour with you. In 1825, France used the threat of military force to force Haiti to make massive financial payments with interest as a price for their independence, including the value of enslaved people freed. In today's dollars, the amount Haiti was forced to pay for its freedom exceeded $20 billion. So my questions to you are these, and I'll tell you my questions and then you can answer them in whatever fashion you wish. I'd like to know what the impact of these payments was on Haiti's development, and whether you believe that it's difficult to accurately assess Haiti's current structural challenges without factoring in that history. And I'd also like you to address the fact that in 2015, former French President Hollande acknowledged a moral debt toward Haiti, but I believe the debt is very tangible. And I'm wondering what you think France's responsibility is here, and whether we and other members of the international community should play a role in urging the French government to seriously address this issue. That's for Ambassador White. Is she with us?
Ambassador White, could you hear the question? She's looking like she doesn't hear you.
I never got over the fact that yeah.
I'm sorry.
I can't.
Okay, but we can't hear you.
If you,
yeah, could you start again?
Try again. Try again, Ambassador White. Go ahead.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? I'm not on mute.
I can hear you.
I'm not on
Mr. Chair, can I reclaim a little bit of my time relative to
Yeah, go ahead.
Ambassador, we can hear you. Go ahead, please. She can't hear me.
Can you? Let me stop the video.
Okay. Did you hear my question?
How can you hear? Yeah, I was always shocked. Yes, I did.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was always shocked that Haiti was actually made to pay those reparations. It was amazing to me. And interestingly enough, the French had played a role in Haiti, but they don't play a bigger role as you always thought that they probably would. During my time in West Africa, the French were the major donors and the major players in West Africa, and that's where their major international interest in the third world is today. So I just don't know enough about why France doesn't play a bigger role in Haiti, to tell you the truth, but they haven't for a long time.
Well, in your opinion, do you believe that we should be urging the French government to address this issue?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to move. I can't see the timer, Mr. Chair, but I assume I have another couple of minutes.
Yeah, another couple of minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to direct this to Ms. Joseph. Our immigration system has treated Haitians differently than immigrants of other nationalities in the region, particularly Cuba and Venezuela, including by limiting access to asylum. And we have not recognized historically Haitians as facing political persecution. Could you talk about how the U.S. response to Haitian migration has shaped our own immigration rules and processes?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Wild. The reality is we can look back, as I mentioned previously. The immigration prison system, as we know it, created for incarcerating Haitian refugees in the 1980s, fleeing political unrest and political abuse and persecution. And as we see today, the majority of the people who have fled are directly connected with political unrest, lack of security, and also the aftermath of the earthquake, the storms, the cholera that we continue to see today. So yes, as Black immigrants, we know very well how Haitian migrants, Haitian asylum seekers have always been treated unfairly. As we are looking today, we have Haitian migrants who have been waiting at the border between 1.5 to 5 years. They have literally been waiting. The majority of the children that are being deported and expelled at the US-Mexico border right now are people or children who were born on the way, whether in Brazil, in Chile, in Venezuela, and in Mexico. Yes, Black immigrants, particularly Haitian immigrants, have always been treated unfairly comparing to other people. So now you mentioned Venezuela. We applaud the administration, providing TPS for Venezuela. As we are looking in the middle of the unrest and chaos, political unrest and chaos in Haiti, yet we do not see a redesignation of TPS for Haiti. So we understand the anti-Black and racism is also ingrained in every system, in every part of who we are as a people, as a country. So that is why we are imploring and demanding that we break away from the same way of treating Haitian immigrants, understanding the value and what we as a people contribute to the United States. Going back to Chicago, to the South, to today elected official and people fighting on behalf of this nation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
I now recognize for 5 minutes the gentlewoman from California, Congresswoman Kim.
Unmute myself. I think I'm unmuted now.
There you go. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Levin. And I want to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. You know, for years, as it's been noted, Haiti has been the second largest recipient of the U.S. assistance in the Western Hemisphere. We provided over $172 million allocated in fiscal year 2020. But despite these enormous amounts of financial assistance from multiple U.S. agencies and international relief organizations, Haiti remains the poorest and least developed nation in the Western Hemisphere. So question to you, Ms. Duan, could you provide insight as to which of our agencies is doing the most effective and efficient job in spending U.S. taxpayer dollars in raising that standard of living in Haiti? And additionally, which incentives are in need of reform or refocusing?
Thank you, Congresswoman Kim. I will let maybe someone like Ambassador White comment on the work of the United States government entities, but my comment will be that many people raised this concern about the amount of money sent to Haiti in terms of development assistance and the lack of result. And I'll say that it's not about the money, the amount of money you send to Haiti. It's about how it is spent, where it is spent, who get that money to do what. And there is a huge problem with the way we allocate aid in Haiti. It doesn't go to the real project. And this is also, it wasn't with the United States government money or United States taxpayer money, but it happened with Venezuela, the Petro-Caribbeans. They help us, they send us a lot of money, and that money was mismanaged, and this was like the largest corruption scandal in the country. It will happen with any other kind of development assistance fund until we send clear signal that we are fighting corruption. And this is exactly what we are doing now in Haiti. And until we do that, you can send how many, the US can help send how much, whatever the amount of money they want, the same thing will happen.
Thank you so much. Given the limited time, I would like to pivot to Ambassador White. If you have any input on this, and can I hear your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think, like I said before, that, you know, tremendous amount of money that we're allocating to Haiti now is going to humanitarian aid, food aid, basic health aid, education, and I think that that's all critical. We do not give money to the Haitian government directly. We explored that. When I was there, we realized that there was just too much corruption in the government, and so we do not do that, and we shouldn't.
You know, I'd like to touch on the lack of infrastructure in Haiti impacting the accessibility to basic services. You know, as you say, we can pour as much money as we want into Haiti, but, and try to help them improve medical treatment or nutrition. But if Haitians are unable to reach food banks because of the poorly constructed roads or access adequate medical care due to poorly constructed hospitals, this money will be concentrated in the city centers and leave much of the country on its own. So how is the U.S. cooperating with Haiti on the infrastructure projects to ensure that aid reaches the populations that need it the most, and which agencies are best suited to accomplish this job? Ambassador White, Ms.
Yeah,
Duan?
sorry. Yeah, I didn't know if you were asking me or not. I do not know currently what is going on in that direction in Haiti. I wish I did, but I don't. When I was there, the PEPFAR money that both AID and CDC ran, was doing a tremendous amount of trying to get money to every clinic across the nation. And we had at least 200 or 300 clinics that we were working with, increasing training to the nurses, getting the right drugs to these clinics. And I don't know if that's still ongoing or not. I believe that it is, but the problem is, just as you say, even if you have a clinic in, village X, if people are having problems accessing that village, then you still have a problem. But any kind of infrastructure improvement of the roads is a multi-billion-dollar project, and there's just not enough money for that. Not U.S.
Let me
money.
put in one more question. I know I want to touch on the human rights situation. Ms. Auguste, as everyone here has testified, that the human rights situation on the ground in Haiti is dire and unstable. The rise in violence against vulnerable populations through homicide, kidnappings, and sexual violence is clearly
Representative Kim, your time has expired. It's really, do you have a very, very quick question for Ms. Auguste, like in 10 seconds?
The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stubbe, can I ask how much time he had left to yield?
His time's expired, Ms. Kim.
Okay, let me just, may I finish my question then?
I'll come back to your time at the end, but there's still a lot of people who want to ask questions.
All right, thank you.
That's okay. Yes, thanks so much. All right, and actually it's my turn now to ask my questions. I want to thank Chairman Meeks and Ranking Member McCall. I just can't tell you how pleased I am that the two of you called this hearing on the full committee level. I know that Chairman Series of the subcommittee agrees with me that a whole committee hearing shows a level of concern that's truly warranted for this crisis in Haiti. I want to make clear before I begin one thing for the record. I'm grateful to all the people who are testifying before us, and I know witnesses could face intimidation or threats because of your honest testimony. I have zero tolerance for that. And I request that any witness who experiences any form of retaliation for your testimony, please alert the committee immediately. Your willingness to appear and your candor are essential to our work, and your well-being is a priority for us. And I think I probably speak for every member here on that. Second, I want to emphasize that we've already made a little history in this hearing today. We have real bipartisan agreement here, which is often helpful and powerful in effective congressional input to change the direction of U.S. foreign policy. Our bipartisan panel of witnesses has made it perfectly clear that both a constitutional referendum and elections organized under de facto President Moise will not work and will not be seen as legitimate by the Haitian people. Ranking Member McCall stated in his usual straightforward way his agreement with this position. So this hearing is truly providing the basis for a new way forward for U.S. policy. The panel has already made clear that Haitian civil society broadly considers Mr. Moise's term to have ended on February 7th, 2021, that he's widely considered illegitimate by the Haitian people, that the CEP he created unilaterally is not legal or legitimate, and that Haiti needs not simply elections, but the conditions that can lead to legitimate elections. The United States needs to stop talking about squabbling between politicians and listen to human rights, business, labor, legal, and other civil society groups. These groups are actually trying to come together to create a plan that would work to restore the rule of law and a path to democracy. So following Congresswoman Bass, let's talk about the way forward. Ms. Douillon, can you briefly explain how Haiti has had transitional governments before and what a broad cross-section of Haitian groups believe should happen now?
Thank you, Congressman Levin. We've had transitional government before because even in the past, elected leaders failed to organize timely election. So we had to fill the void. And we had it in 2024, we had it in 2015, and this time around is the same problem. Jovenel Moïse, despite the fact that he enjoyed a comfortable majority in parliament, failed to organize election. So now we have to replace the parliament. We have to elect local officials, and we have to elect a new president because his term ended. So a transitional government will help restore democratic order, will help improve the overall security situation and organize election. And
can I just ask, I don't know if Ms. Auguste is still here, but if so, I'd like her to weigh in my last minute on whether she, if she can add to what you said or whether she agrees with you to see if the panel broadly agrees on this. And I see, can you hear me? Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Oui, bien sûr, moi entendez-vous très bien. Merci en pile, Congressman Levin.
I hear you very well. Thank you very much, Congressman Levin.
Je vais commencer par menace qu'on saute parler là pour nous dire que nous-mêmes, par exemple, dans la société civile, la militant droits mondiaux, effectivement, nous intimider de manière générale.
I would like to start with the threats, especially those of us who are in the human rights community generally.
Mais cependant, situation, monde qui décide mettre tête ensemble pour défendre droit yo dans la saline avec tout l'autre quartier défavorisé yo plus menacé que non.
However, the people who are living in the impoverished communities who pull themselves together to stand against the human rights violations and against this unconstitutional government are more threatened than us.
Deuxième bagage moi ta remen di c'est que nous-mêmes au niveau de société civile là quoi que c'est communauté internationale là qui kembe Jovenel Moïse côté lié.
One thing that I would like to emphasize on is that us within the Haitian civil society, we realize that it is the international community that allows Jovenel Moïse to continue to remain at the palace.
Impunité a tellement grand que, par exemple, Fednel Monchéri, yo arrêté le 13 février 2021, li impliqué dans massacre la Saline, mais yo la gueule immédiatement.
The impunity is so daring that on February 13, they arrested Fednel Monchéri, who has already been cited in the La Saline massacre. They released him a few hours thereafter.
Ça veut dire nous pas qu'à compter sous équipe ça parce que Jean président mixte dit là Jovenel Moïse perdu toute crédibilité devant pays devant population.
That means we cannot count on this government to provide security and ensure that the population gets what they need. Like Ranking Chairman Mix have said before, the president, former President Jovenel Moïse have lost all credibility and is not able to govern the country at the moment.
All right, I'm afraid my time has expired and I'm going to hold myself to the same rule. So if we have time later, Ms. Auguste will come back to you. And now my understanding is there are not currently any of our Republican colleagues who wish to ask questions. And that means I get to turn it over to my esteemed colleague from Pennsylvania, Representative Houlihan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Representative Levin, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. My first question is for Ms. Douillon. I was hoping to be able to dive a little bit deeper into the role that women can play in policy discussions in Haiti around governance and around constitutional reform, and how can we here in the U.S. and in this body help to promote women's participation in the government, in the Haitian government, and in civil society?
Thank you, Congresswoman Houlihan. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly.
You did.
And as a feminist myself, I believe women have a large role to play in Haiti politics. And this is actually the case already, but much is needed to be done. And I also need to acknowledge that several feminist organizations with concern over the situation in Haiti, actually, the current situation in Haiti. Women need to be represented in the electoral council. But what happened is that respected organizations refused to adhere to a process that was legal, and the government picked some other women from organizations that no one knows about to constitute that electoral council. And what happened is that you have organizations that are legitimate, recognized, that have been on the ground for many years. They are not involved and they are left behind in the process. And they keep saying it, and they release several press notes. And we believe the civil society in their plan to have a transitional government actually specified that there need to be a quota of women, because several times they violated this. It is the law. We need to have at least 30% of women, but many times they violate this law. They don't respect this quota, and they are advocating for it. And we believe, and even for the new constitution, that process, because it's not legal, those respected organizations are not involved. But in the future, when the society will agree to make change to the constitution, maybe we will have provision for increased women participation in Haiti politics.
Is there anything that you can think of that we can be doing to be helpful in driving that process?
Yes, first of all, maybe you can question why those legitimate organizations are not involved, and how you can have or you can do anything without including women and those who have been defending women's rights in the country for so many years. And I think we can start here, and later making sure that whether it is in terms of development assistance or anything or any decision that is being taken, if women are on the table, because it is very important that we do not have the kind of situation where only men are deciding what's the fate of the country. And I have to note that there is something really positive happening with the young activists. Organization like mine has many women involved, and we are actually showing that we are equally qualified, and we can have like leadership position. We can assume our responsibility just like men, and there is no reason we shouldn't have equal opportunities.
Agreed. And I'm not sure, Representative Levin, how much more time that I have.
1:20.
All right, great. With my 1:20, I'd like to direct my last question to Ms. Auguste. My question is, how can we best be utilizing our relationships in Latin America and the Caribbean to help support democracy in Haiti? What can we be doing to be helpful there, and what international organizations are most useful? And thank you.
Avec États-Unis?
She's just getting the translation.
OK, merci en pile Congresswoman Houlihan. Nous pensons que États-Unis effectivement gen en pile bagay que yo capable faire pour changer relation yo avec Haïti.
Thank you, Congresswoman Houlihan. I think there's a lot of things that the U.S. can do to change their relationships with Haiti.
Mais premier bagay que nous pensons faut que c'est effectivement administration américaine nan mette li à l'écoute de société civile là qui gagne en pile que le ka partager avec lui.
First and foremost, I think the U.S. administration needs to listen to the Haitian civil society, who have a lot of recommendations and demand that they can share with them that can be significant to the change that we are seeking.
Et avec permission, moi ta aimé rebondir sur question participation femme dans l'élection.
With your permission, I would like to quickly address the issue of women's participations within the election system.
Representative Levin, I don't know if I have the time for that, but perhaps we could go back to that.
No, you have a bit of time left.
Okay, great.
It's a little different when there's translation because they stop the clock for the translation.
Oh, okay,
So don't
okay.
worry. Well, I'll stop you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Ou gon ti tan ki
Ok.
rete, ok, fè ça.
Ok, merci. Et donc, qui ça me tape dit rapidement, c'est que situation insécurité nous gen konya la, pas permettre femmes participer dans l'élection, ni en tant que candidate, ni en tant que électrice.
One thing that I would like to add is that the current insecurity that we have will not allow women to participate in this election, neither as candidate or as voters.
Et même gens tout parti politique yo tout, c'est eux même qui pour venir avec des propositions, des mécanismes pour permettre que femmes puissent participer dans la question électorale.
At the same time, the Haitian political parties have to come and put forward the mechanisms to allow women to be able to participate fully in the electoral process.
Mais
with that, I think we have to move on. I'm sorry. Again, if we have more time, we'll come back. It's such a rich conversation. And I will just point out that all four of our panelists and our translator are women, and they're doing an outstanding job in this hearing, whatever that means.
I yield back. Thank you.
And Mr. Fitzpatrick, if you have questions, you are up next, or if you want to wait, because I know you just popped on.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. If Representative Young Kim is still on, I'm happy to yield my time to her. I know she was looking.
Yes, she was. I don't know if she is or not. If you don't see her name, we'll wait a minute. All right, well, we can come back to that as well. So let me recognize the gentlewoman from Nevada, Representative Titus, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been indeed an interesting conversation. I'd like to shift a little bit to maybe Ms. Joseph and ask her about the refugee situation. One of President Biden's first actions in office was to sign an executive order rescinding some of Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies, and he also directed Homeland Security to re-examine our own policies and priorities. DHS instituted a 100-day pause on deportations with limited exceptions during this review process, but a legal challenge unfortunately lifted that pause, so deportations are continuing. I just wonder if the Haitian government is doing anything to ensure the return of individuals, many of whom left saying they feared for their lives because of the gang violence throughout the country.
Thank you so much, Representative Titus. The reality is, even when President Biden's moratorium did not cover the expulsion of migrants under Title 42, which is the CDC title, and we are asking for that title to be rescinded so that we can provide protection for the most vulnerable people. I also would like to mention that it is extremely concerning for the Haitian president, for the Haitian government to be agreeing to receive people who have literally fled due to violence, due to political unrest, and due to persecution. As I mentioned during my first opening, one of the women who was kidnapped and raped and fled was returned to Haiti and is currently in hiding, unable to leave her house because of fear that what will happen to her. So with all of that being said, what's happening with the migration, what's happening at the border with the deportation, with the expulsion, we are asking for all of that to stop because it is unbelievable. And we believe that it is borderline criminal for the Haitian government to be receiving people in these conditions at the present moment. And also would like to highlight that even people who were not born in Haiti have been deported to Haiti. We are demanding accountability on both sides, on the U.S. side and the Haitian side, understanding it is a sending and receiving a relationship, and we're asking for that to stop immediately.
So are NGOs involved in that whole process with you, either through the courts or in legal cases, or advocating for some of these people who have returned?
We are advocating, however, when people are returned to Haiti, it's extremely impossible for them to get any type of relief. When they are returned, released with nothing, and they have to find a way to fend for themselves, to go into hiding, to try to find another way so that they can probably even leave the country again. There's absolutely no relief, no protection for people who are being returned to Haiti at this moment.
Sounds like that's something that we may be able to look into to provide some help at our end.
We definitely have not just had look, but we must provide help now, and we must provide, a way for people to legally, safely get protection in asking asylum. We must redesignate TPS for Haiti to cover those who are here and really to make sure that we have a strong Haitian American community.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of time left. I'd like to ask about education in Haiti. We have the figure that 1 of every 2 Haitians aged 15 and over is illiterate. Yet we know education is the way to get out of poverty, to create a better future. Is there anything that we can do to help help NGOs or help any of you help with expanding education opportunities?
Merci en pile, Congresswoman Titus. Et effectivement, je ne dis à question éducation, même genre avec toute l'autre question d'Ouamonio, c'est un problème.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Titus. Today, education is a problem, just like all the other issues that we are dealing with.
Et effectivement, nous avons un système éducatif qui pas bail ni bon condition d'apprentissage pour Timounio et qui pas bail tout un système égal pour tout le monde gagne même accès à droit à l'éducation.
The current educational system we have does not provide a good system for everybody to learn adequately, and it also is not a system that is fair to able to address everyone's problems regarding of whatever discrepancies or challenges that they may have.
Mais ça qui est plus grave là, en fait, c'est que nous gagnons tout un système qui est corrompu parce que gagnons l'argent qui était décidé pour te prendre, pour être capable de mettre dans la question éducation et régime PHTK, nous ne pas jamais aucune information sur l'utilisation de l'argent ça.
We also have a system that is corrupted because there was the National Educational Fund that was created by the Matili government. Money is taken from the Haitian diaspora on a regular basis. No report has been given on that money, and it has not been utilized to assist the Haitian children who needs to be attending school.
And again, I need to step in and say the gentlewoman's time has expired. But again, that answer is on such an important question. And I understand, thanks, Representative Titus. I understand that even school children now are being, at risk of kidnappings, which is just incredible. Now let me recognize my wonderful colleague from the state of Minnesota for 5 minutes, Representative Omar, for her questions.
Thank you so much for calling this important meeting, Chairman. I'm especially grateful that we have the opportunity to hear directly from folks who are being impacted by our policies. I wanted to start with, direct my question to Ms. Augusta. The last president changed U.S. policy to make it easier for American gun manufacturers to export guns to other countries, including Haiti. Many of us are pushing for our new president to reverse this. In Haiti, how do gangs and organized crime get their guns, and do these guns used to commit violence in Haiti mostly come from the United States?
Merci en pile, Congresswoman Omar. On va commencer à répondre.
I will start by answering your question.
Et effectivement, gagné en pile d'armes qui rentraient sur le territoire haïtien et qui sortent aux États-Unis.
Yes, there are a lot of weapons that arrive on the Haitian territory that comes from the U.S.
Yo rentré particulièrement dans port yo.
They come through our different various ports.
Mais faut que nous dit tout que gagne des séries de l'autres armes tout qui rentraient et qui passaient sous frontière yo, parce que je ne jodi a port yo à frontière yo c'est de véritables passoires que yo y.
There are also other weapons that enter the country through our borders because both our ports and the borders are just opened.
Journée jodi a gagné yon résolution qui prend et que Haïti pas doit rentrer zam.
There was a resolution that was taken that Haiti should not be entering weapons in the country.
Mais malgré embargo ça, zam a monté descendre et pas gen aucune autorité qui a clairement dit combien zam qui nan men bandi armé yo.
Despite the fact that there is an armed embargo on Haiti, to this day, no authorities in the Haitian government can tell us where these weapons are coming from and who's entering them in the country.
Mais c'est bandi armé yo qui toujours dit que yo mieux armé yo même que même police nationale là et c'est peut-être ça nous dit que police nationale là li affaibli et c'est voulu. Merci.
It is the gangs who said that they are better armed than the Haitian National Police, and that is why we are saying that the Haitian National Police is currently weakened and politicized.
Thank you for your answer. And to Ms. Dion, should the United States be supporting elections in Haiti this year, regardless of the context? And in your opinion, what are the changes that election in Haiti this year? What are the chances that the elections this year would be free, fair, and legitimate?
Thank you, Congresswoman Omar. If the United States want to waste money and spark the new political crisis, yes, they can invest in election in Haiti this year. Otherwise, the best alternative will be to listen to civil society who could indicate when it is okay to hold election. Because with gangs member, with a president that is acting like a strong man, and clear violations of human rights and many areas that are under gang control, there isn't any possibility we could have fair and inclusive election. Who can campaign without gang support? And we don't want the kind of officials that have gang support to be elected. But if we organize election now, those people are the ones who have more advantage by the current insecurity and the climate of fear that is going on in Haiti. And also, we need to audit the electoral system, and we have an illegal electoral council. All those problems need to be solved if we want to have elections that could lead us to the change that the Haitian people deserve.
Really appreciate your answer. And to Ms. Joseph, I know that you've just addressed this question in regards to deportations. I'm wondering if you can maybe expand on how these deportations are impacting the situation on the ground in Haiti, especially in the context of the COVID pandemic.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Omar. Thank you so much for being here. The reality is we started asking to stop deportation and expulsions to Haiti under Title 42 back in March. When we realized that was going to be a major catastrophe for Haiti with a lack of infrastructure for medical care. And I also want to highlight that the numbers that are being seen or reported are not actual numbers. So in Haiti, there is no way for people to literally know how many people have been affected and died from COVID for many different reasons. However, we also understand that in May of 2020, we had words that at least 3 of those people who were deported to Haiti, upon arriving in Haiti, tested positive for COVID-19. And I personally saw a spike in COVID-19 as relation to this flight. We also understand that a lot of people that were deported to Guatemala also were tested positive for COVID-19 upon arrival in the home country. So this is a major concern as we understand transfers between detention centers and prison and flights carries over the grave injustice that can be seen when it comes to medical assistance and medical care. So that is why we are asking for the stop of those expulsion and those deportation in the spirit of good neighborhood, in the spirit of protecting and healthcare.
Thank you all for your wonderful insights. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlewoman yields back now to the first of our fabulous fresh women, the gentlewoman from California, Representative Jacobs.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here. This has been incredibly interesting, and I share my colleagues' concerns about the current situation. But I wanted to ask Ms. Doyon a question. You know, I too have been part of conversations around Haiti for many years where we've been having similar conversations over and over again. But I noticed that in your opening, you said that you think this is not the same moment as other crises and that we have an opportunity to fundamentally change things. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on why you think that's the case and what specifically it would take so that this really would fundamentally change things and we would not continue this cycle.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jacobs. I think we can only go back to maybe the time where when we were fighting dictatorship to find the same spirit that is going on in Haiti now. That call for change, that the involvement of so many different kind of people. For example, I'm speaking on behalf of NUPAPDOMI, a collective of engaged citizens who've never done politics before. We were never involved so actively in activism. But back in 2018, we've noticed that something needed to be done. Like we needed to be involved to save what is left to be saved of Haiti. And this is why we are doing it. And we've been doing it constantly since 2018. And this is because of people like us in NUPAPDOMI, the Petro Challenger, those people who fought dictatorship and are still fighting the rise of dictatorship. Now that I believe that something different is happening, we are tired. Like there is no one wants to keep going with the same cycle. And it's obvious that the system that we are fighting can no longer renew itself. For like 4 years in power, the president, despite the fact that he has a comfortable majority, he hasn't been able to achieve anything. Like he hasn't been able to satisfy any need from the population. And he doesn't even have like supporters to go on the street to say, we are with him, we are supporting him. Like everyone realized, like the majority of people, there is a broad consensus that we need to change something if we want to develop this country. And I believe that this new era can start now. And this is why we're asking for the US government to recognize that the civil society is taking the lead, to recognize that this time around is different and they need to be on the side of change.
Thank you so much. And then I'd like to ask if Ambassador White is still on, what she thinks the United States can learn from its previous interventions and in terms of how we should approach things differently. And, you know, I know you talked about conditioning aid and some other things, but I guess what I'm just trying to make sure is that we don't do the same 10 things we've done in every think tank report we've had since the earthquake, and then have this same hearing again in 3 years from now when it doesn't work.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think we have a unique opportunity right now to get tough. And, you know, when I look back, even during the, you know, some of the final months of when I was in Haiti, because we were going through the same, you know, the powers that there was no parliament. The CEP was first made up of a cast of characters that weren't acceptable, but we got it right finally. But I think we have to hold their feet to the fire, and we have to be tough, and we have to be outspoken. And I think the Biden administration is ready to do that. I hope so. But let me just mention one other thing that during this hearing, couldn't tell if it was a Republican or a Democrat asking the questions. And I'm really good at that. So congratulations to you, because I really do feel that this was a bipartisan committee hearing, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
And I believe Mr. Meeks is back to take the gavel back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Levin. I now recognize the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and Global Counterterrorism, Representative Kathy Manning of North Carolina, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Meeks. I want to thank all of the witnesses for their testimony today. And I'm delighted that we've had this hearing so early in this session of Congress. The situation that was described by all of our witnesses is heartbreaking and discouraging. And we've talked at length about the political situation. Ambassador White, you had some very specific suggestions of things that could be done to address the political situation. And I'm wondering if you have similarly specific recommendations for steps the U.S. could take to improve the economic situation in Haiti.
Yeah, I do. I think overall, USA has always been my contention that we should spend more money on getting people jobs, because countries don't move forward without jobs. But in order to get people into jobs, we need to do some pay attention to at least giving people skills that they can use to rebuild the country. And when I was head of USAID in Liberia, we had this fabulous program that linked literacy skills with basic skills in electricity and brick making and building, with car mechanics, et cetera, so that we taught people literacy at the same time. We were training them in basic skills with related skills. And the United States Congress has been over and over very reluctant to give money to job training skills. And I think that's a mistake.
Oops. Would any of the other witnesses like to comment on that? I'm looking for specific ways the U.S. Can help improve the economic situation in Haiti.
If Representative Manning, if you allow, I would like to add a few points. If we want to improve the economic situation in Haiti, there is a need to attract investment, but we cannot attract investment if the current president is still undermining rule of law, and if the overall security situation is still as bad as it is. This is why so many people don't come to invest in Haiti, and we cannot have like people in the diaspora coming back home to improve, to work, to invest. And this is one, we cannot dissociate the economic situation from the political and social situation. And I believe we should improve and solve this political crisis if we want to attract investment, restore peace, so that economic activities can thrive. Because what's happening now with people like fearing to even leave their house, there is great concern that we could see any improvement anytime soon.
Thank you.
I would like to briefly add that, again, we need, as my fierce justice warrior Emmanuel mentioned, we need to look at the root causes of where we are right now, and really, work with the people of Haiti to create the infrastructure that is needed in order for us to move forward, including education, including access to healthcare, including rebuilding agriculture, upon which Haiti has always flourished. Sending rice to Haiti, sending all those things that are literally diminish the farming industry. We need to look into building sustainable structural in Haiti, from education to access to healthcare, to farming, to agriculture, so that we, as the Haitian people, can reclaim their place and really create a system where people will be able to stay at home, safe, and others can come in and then investing into the community as well.
Thank you. And Ms. Justino, would you like to comment on that as well?
Yeah. Oui, merci en pile, Congresswoman Manning. En fait, sous situation économique pays a, li directement lié avec situation crise sociopolitique yo.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Mannings. The economic situation is currently tied to the social political crisis that we are dealing with.
Et depuis pas gen instabilité politique, pas gen instabilité économique et au contraire a gagné plus monde, Jean Joseph avec Emmanuel Asodili qui pour vle quitter pays a aller dans l'autre pays.
If you don't have political stability, you cannot have economic stability, just like my colleague Joseph and Douillon have already explained.
Et donc, d'abord, c'est reconnaître Jean Sodia que selon article 134-2 Constitution, mandat Jovenel Moïse fini et permettre que nous gagnions stabilité politique dans le pays pour nous gagner stabilité économique. Merci.
The first step we need to take in terms of changing the economic situations in Haiti is to once acknowledge Article 134-2 from the Constitution, which states that the mandate for former President Jovenel Moïse has ended on February 7, 2021. Then the country can work toward building a greater nation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired. I now recognize the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Western Hemisphere, Civilian Security, Migration, and International Economic Policy, Representative Juan Vargas from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I hope you can hear me. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you very much for this hearing. Being towards the end here, I've had the opportunity to listen to not only our presenters, but also all the questions from our colleagues. And I have to tell you, I don't know what we should do. I really don't. But I know that what we should not do, we should not deport Haitians back to Haiti. That's what we should not do. We shouldn't do that. And why shouldn't we do that? From all the testimony that we heard here, people are afraid to go buy groceries. People are afraid to pay money to get on the bus. People are afraid to make even small buys of anything because the gangs figure out they have money and they'll get kidnapped to take that money away. They've closed some of the schools, not so much even for the fear of COVID-19, but because children and their parents get kidnapped. We should not deport people back into that situation. That's outrageous. The administration should allow them to stay and until the situation changes in Haiti. Now, I have to say also, in my own opinion, I could be wrong, but I think it's also discrimination. And I think it's discrimination because Haitians are Black. I think that that's a reality. I think that there's a terrible discrimination going on here and it shouldn't happen. So anyway, I think we should urge the administration to quit deporting people back to Haiti. I mean, does anyone agree with me at all? I mean, how about Ms. Douillon? Do you agree that we shouldn't deport people back to Haiti?
I agree that given the conditions in Haiti right now, it's not fair and to deport people back to Haiti. And if we really want to avoid dealing with this kind of situation, like having people migrating illegally to the United States, we need to support efforts to restore peace in Haiti and make Haiti livable for the people.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think we need to do all we can to help Haiti. I'm completely in favor of that. I just don't understand why we're deporting Haitians back to Haiti in these conditions. That doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't make any sense. I know also we've been talking about how to have fair and free elections, that, you know, we can't trust the situation it is right now to have free and fair elections. I agree with that. I think that'll take some time to sort out. But in the meantime, why are we deporting people? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. And that's something I think that we should put pressure on this administration. This administration has the opportunity to do that. I mean, they do it for Cubans, they do it for Venezuelans, for others. Why not for Haitians?
Congressman Vargas, thank you so much for those points. The reality is we absolutely believe that it is anti-Black racism play a big part of why people are being deported to Haiti, and also the fact that we continue to see some type of support to the current administration in Haiti. And as I mentioned before, it is borderline criminal for both, the U.S. sending people and for Haiti to be receiving people. We are asking, as you have said, to provide a safe and welcoming a plan for those people who have left, who have run, and have literally been at the border between 1.5 to 5 years. It is unconscionable to see the condition that Black people continues to be treated, not only in the United States, but around the world. And we see a direct relations between how they are deporting people to Haiti under the rules of Title 42, which literally allow people to be tested negative before being deported based on what ICE is saying. It is absolutely no reason for the United States, after President Biden promised the Haitian American community that he was going to lead the way. We cannot continue to repeat this inhumane treatment of Haitians. It is unacceptable.
Amen. And I would add this too. I live on the border here in San Diego. The discrimination that goes on also in Mexico when Haitians arrive here also is terrible. The discrimination that they face in Mexico when they have every right to present themselves at the border and say, I'm here for asylum and apply for asylum. Anyway, I hope we can do something about this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. Our last member to talk is the distinguished chair of the Financial Services Committee, who has been an advocate for Haiti from the time that I have known her. And that's why she spent the time here today, the Honorable Maxine Waters. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am so pleased for the leadership that you're providing on this issue. I'm a friend of Haiti, and I've been for years, and I've been through some of the better times, but all of the worst times. I know Andy Aped, and I know he's down there exploiting the people still. I helped to get Guy Philippe put in jail, and Toto Constant that they've sent back here to the United States, who we should have kept here. He was the death squad leader under Cedras when that coup d'etat took place. I've been with Aristide. I rented a plane along with Randall Robinson. Remember when we had Trans-Africa, Mr. Chairman, and we rented a jet and we went up and we got Aristide. And I brought him back from the African Republic that he was, Central Africa Republic, that he had been banished to. Now, knowing all of this, I also understand Haiti, and I understand the mulattoes elite, and I understand their relationship to some of the worst people in government. And that's who Moise and all of them work with, because they're all about the money, exploiting Haiti, and basically about the fraud and about the corruption. I get all of that. But I want you to know that, people are being killed. The last time I was there, it was April 2019, and I met with the victims of La Saline, the massacre that took place. And they told me about everything that happened November of 2018. And this was all because they were part of Lavalas. And so, that's the old party of President Aristide that was so prominent in trying to get democracy in Haiti. Someone asked today about what was going to be done or what had ever been done about the fact that the French basically piled all of this debt on Haiti and what was going to be done to work in getting that back. Well, that's one of the reasons Aristide was ousted, was because he was talking about stuff like that. But I want to tell you that there have been a lot of reports of similar massacres, such as the one that was held in La Saline. I met with people whose houses had been burned down. They had no place to go. All they had was the clothing on their back. And so whether we're talking about Bel Air or we're talking about Cité Soleil, all of them are under absolute, violence that is being perpetrated on them by this president and his police force. In May of last year, the death squad that was headed by Jimmy Cherizier, but everybody knows him as Barbecue. He's running wild down there. He's killing people. He's carried out multiple attacks on civilians all through the Port-au-Prince neighborhoods of Tokyo, Delmas, Pont Rouge, burning houses and killing people. And during these violent attacks, members of the Haitian National Police allied with Barbecue reportedly stood by and did nothing. No one has been accountable for these killings either. So there's a lack of accountability. Now, I know the question has been raised, what can we do? Mr. Chairman, I think you're in a great position to help provide some leadership. I don't know exactly how it should take place, but I think there are some recommendations that may make good sense. Number one, the State Department is very key. I realize Haiti is a sovereign nation. We can't just go in there and tell them what to do and what not to do, what have you. But we do support Haiti, and we do have a State Department there. And so they've got to be involved in some way. The other thing is this: France and Canada, I've seen them involved when they thought it was in their best interest to be involved. But I think if Canada and France, the State Department, the United States government, led by you, and the civil society of Haiti get together and form some kind of a task force of some kind, you've got to get President Moïse to stop this April referendum. This cannot happen. This will destroy any efforts to have a constitution, it will undermine the Constitution of Haiti. I mean, this has got to be stopped. And if everybody can get together, and maybe some people from the diaspora, along with civil society and with the State Department, the UN and you and others, maybe we can stop this referendum. It has got to stop. Now, when you talk about some of the people in civil society, Dr. Marie Antoinette Gautier, Marie Louise Gautier, these people are all in jail. They picked them up in the middle of the night and took them to jail. Louise Bateau, and of course, the Supreme Court Justice, Purcell, he was arrested also, but they let him go on his own recognizance. But the rest of them are still in jail, and they're talking about they're going to stay there for 90 days until they can decide what to do with them. But in response, and I don't know, but I worked with one of the past prime ministers, Sayant, I guess, was up for a while, and somehow he got kicked out by Mosaic. I don't know what he's doing. But between those of you who are here today, some of the names that I am mentioning, and with some of the people that you trust in civil society, get together, and everybody says to Moise, you will not have this referendum. It will not take place. I think then there can be a start to deal with how to follow the Constitution, how to get a legitimate CEP, and how to go forward with elections. The ambassador is correct, Ambassador Wright. You cannot have it in this atmosphere. There's no way it can take place. And all the international interests should contribute the resources that are necessary at the right time, stopping this referendum and making him step aside. You know, he is the president, but if everybody comes together and say, you cannot do this. That's not kicking him out as president, but the people will do that when you get the elections going and you have them step aside and stop the referendum. And so I just wanted to add that I love Haiti. I will visit Haiti with my friends, and I know that this is not political, but I'm Lavalas. That's it. That's what I've worked with. I love President Aristide. He is building a university there that is educating doctors and lawyers, and it's fabulous. When I was there was over 500 or 600 graduates that were coming from that university. We can do this, but we've got to come together with all of the interests. We've got to stop him in his tracks. We've got the international community to come together and supply the dollars and move with an election in an atmosphere where people won't be killed. And with that, I know that I've taken up enough time. I'd like to submit for the record a letter that I sent to U.S. Ambassador Michelle Sisson that was signed by 14 of us, and an op-ed that I wrote in the Miami Herald entitled Haiti's President Jovenel Moise's Shameful Assault on Democracy. And I'd just like to say that include CARICOM in that group of people who will get together. So that was 3 letters that I have sent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to follow your lead. I'm going to do what I know you can. I'm support you in what I know you can do. And I think you have to take the leadership in having to bring this group of people together. As I said, civil society will be central to that, but all of these others who play a role, I think we can force him to step aside while we get together to plan an election. Thank you so much. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The old lady's time has expired. All questions have now been had, and all questions are now concluded. I now call upon Ranking Member McCall if you have any comments before we close. In closing, let me do this. I don't think Ranking McCall is with us. I want to thank all of our witnesses today. Number one, your insight has been invaluable. I want to thank all of the members of this committee who've been engaged on this critical situation in Haiti. There is clearly a lot of work to be done, and we're going to need to stay focused on Haiti. And I want all that have been witnessing and listening to this hearing today to know that this committee is going to stay focused. This is not just a one hearing and off, and then we're not going to continue to pay attention to what's going on. I too, as I've said in my opening statement, am very concerned about moving forward with a referendum and what the current makeup of is the CEP, because we have to have free and fair elections that involves everyone. Civil society must be a part of this. The Haitian people must have confidence in an election. You can't have an election just for election's sake because we will still be in the same place. There's got to be integrity. So this committee will work with the State Department and the administration, bringing folks together so that we will know that there will be a change on what's going on. So the Haitian people face a big deal. And it's a priority of mine that we work to elevate the voices of civil society who want democracy and the rule of law. And I thank each and every one of you for being with us today. And I now